Alright, so I'm just going to be doing a post-Lukestream. I believe Babs will be on at some point, but let me just get everything set up for you folks. Let's see. So, I need to copy the link. And 1 second. Let's hide this so there's no funny business. There we go. No funny business, Mr. Lebowski. Here we go. And let's see. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. I found today a lot more discussion of the trans issue than I expected. It is an interesting issue. I think that there's a lot of expectations on both sides that things are going to radically change, but I don't think that either side is going to actually find the revolutionary shift that they desire. Let's see. So for a little while it might be quiet here until I can get Babs on. Let's see. Here we go. In the meanwhile, I would like to see if I can find one of those nice Michael Anton videos for you folks. So he's done a recent interview, which I think I haven't fully listened to yet, but he always delivers. Here we go. Here we go. And I see that you guys can't hear that. Let's try now.
Well, I think
There it
certainly
goes.
his economic stances, his immigration stance, his awareness of the growing problem of what he calls tech tyranny. It sounds a bit, it sounds a bit over the top, but I think he's actually right. There is a tyranny, a tyrannical threat from the tech companies. These things in particular, the Republican Party should do something about and haven't been, or haven't been sufficient. It's no secret that Donald Trump, for instance, won the election, I think, largely for his immigration stance. He promised to build a wall. We don't have a wall. He promised to reform the system, to get rid of especially some of the dumbest aspects of the system, like the diversity lottery, where we take people at random and admit them into the country. He hasn't been able to do that. Now, I say all this not to blame the president, just to make clear that the opposition to what he's trying to do is enormous,
Right.
and it comes from all sides, including within his own party. So it's, it used to be when the political system in this country functioned more or less that someone would win an election saying they were going to do X or Y or Z. The rest of the
I've heard this a lot that that Trump has fallen beneath expectations in terms of delivering on his promises. I don't think that that's quite true, particularly when you control for the fact that he's as controversial as he is. I rather think that he's been treated fairly well by the system, and that's a controversial opinion in these circles. But nevertheless, I maintain that he could have had it a lot worse. And it's not like he took a conflict-averse path. He's flown close to the sun and generally survived, and even come out triumphant in some cases, which is remarkable. Let's see, we have the chat starting up. Here's Fletcher. I need to pop out the chat and make it its own thing. There we go. So we're gonna add that to the thing momentarily. Let's keep on hearing Michael Anton.
the politicians would say, well, the people have spoken. I guess we better go along with it. Remember how many Democrats, for instance, voted for the Reagan tax cuts in 1981 because they knew they were enormously popular and the president had won on that. Well, that's not what happens anymore. What happens now is the elements who really think that they control or ought to control the government say, yeah, you may want this, but we don't, and so we're just not going to let you have it. And it's a major problem. The same thing on economics. So Trump is right that the Reagan solution worked in the 80s. It doesn't work now. Or the other thing I would say to that is that people forget what the Reagan economic policy was. They only remember the tax cuts and supply side. They don't remember that Reagan was something of a protectionist himself and stood up for American industry and American workers and either threatened or imposed tariffs on certain sectors of the economy and against other countries. That's all just swept under the rug because big business and the ruling class and the financial interests who really run the economy today, they don't want that, and so they try to pretend like it's never happened before and it's never benefited American industry, which is totally not true. So my point here is that Tucker's right about that too, that
this is often the case that you'll see people basically underestimating protectionism or conflating it with autarkic measures and saying that protectionism means cutting yourself off completely. You'll often see in successful stories a lot of informal, or informal isn't the right word, but a lot of measures that were taken that were kind of less than above board in order to protect native industry. That's part of most success stories, and so it's really quite something to see the orthodoxy say that it's absolutely absurd to restrict trade at all. This is what all these success stories did. They protected nascent industries, and if things were going badly, then the state would leap in various ways in order to protect it. This is ubiquitous, and yet when Trump does it, it's called some sort of economic illiteracy.
There are economic solutions that would be that would violate the tenets of perfect free market conservatism. Yeah. But, the free market is not the highest conservative value. The people are supposed to be. And when you have an economy that isn't serving the people, something isn't working. And when he talks about trade, when he talks about, certain economic things that, for instance, it was only a week or two ago that Tucker opened the show with a segment on, he didn't tell you who it was, but he summarized one of the a presidential candidate's economic policy. And then at the end he says, it's Elizabeth Warren. He goes, well, that sounds better than anything the Republicans are talking about right now. Right now, he doesn't like her on a whole lot of other issues and so on, but it just shows you how far out of sync and out of touch the party has gotten.
Absolutely.
Our party, that is to say.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking to that point, despite the great success of President Trump and his agenda and the sort of new brand of conservatism that he ushered in, many within the Republican establishment, as you know, as within the ruling class and even within his own administration, are looking ahead beyond Trump and trying to anoint an heir to President Trump along the lines of conventional pre-Trump Republican orthodoxy. You hear names like Nikki Haley, Dan Crenshaw, even Marco Rubio, and also Mike Pence, who we love very much, but is seen in some regards as a neoconservative on foreign policy. I know it's very, very early, but do you think Tucker Carlson could potentially be made into a future presidential candidate for the Republican Party?
Honestly, I interviewed him for the article that you're talking about at some length. And I asked him that question. I said, look, there's going to be pressure. I already hear it from friends of mine. There's going to be pressure on you to get into politics. Would you ever do it? And the famous line about declining to run for office. Most people, when asked, they give some coy answer that leaves the door open.
Yeah.
Oh, I see reports that Luke is done with his live stream. Let me see if I can find that live stream. Here we are. When he's done. Oh, it's offline. If anyone is still in the chat, they can post the link to this stream there. So let's see if I can find that. Oop. You go to KyleRowland.com. Rather the channel. Copy video URL and go there. You go to kylerowland.com. I mean, rather the channel. Copy video URL and all right, go there. So before Babs arrives, I'm gonna just, go ahead and keep on reviewing Michael Anton's stuff and respond to the chat when possible. Fletcher has the take that the weekend streams are actually more interesting. Freeform. I think that freeform streams are obviously a lot easier to squeeze entertainment out of when you're more controlled, when you're more planned. That's something that usually you have to have a whole team behind the presenters in order to make it compelling for long periods of time.
The famous, the most famous denial that I'll ever do it was from William Tecumseh Sherman, who said, if nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve, right? And so that's called a Sherman-esque denial. Anything less than a Sherman-esque denial is usually interpreted in political circles as, hey, he left the door open, maybe. So I asked Carlson that question, and he didn't quite give me a Sherman-esque denial. Okay. But he said that he didn't want to do it. He had no intention of doing it, that he doesn't actually enjoy being famous. He doesn't like the pressure it puts on himself and on his family. And he's doing it obviously to make money. He needs to make a living and support his family, and because he's promoting causes that he believes in. But it didn't sound to me like he had any real appetite to take that to the next level and seek office. So I think we need somebody like him. We need somebody who thinks the things that he does and who has the proven ability to appeal to a mass audience. But I don't think we can count on it actually being him.
Yeah. Do you know of anyone who might fit that bill at this point?
No. I think there's a lot of interest in and hope that John.
We're seeing Babs have some technical difficulties. Hopefully he'll be here soon. In the meanwhile, I want to skip ahead in this video. I don't want to just play the video. Let's see. I think Michael Anton gets to some really interesting points later on.
The country is any longer going to keep on pretending that China's not a threat, that the economic status quo that we've...
One interesting thing that I've heard Michael Anton say on China is he was rebutting someone who was kind of a China doomer, who was saying that China's going to take over everything, or that China was aggressive. And he mentioned that one thing that China isn't is expansionist, and that's a very good point. China has had a lot of opportunities to directly conquer territory, and so far has eschewed them. It is the 800-pound gorilla in its field, but it has chosen to use its military power relatively sparingly, and that's notable.
Inherited or that we've put in place for the last 30 years has worked for Americans. I think things have changed, and any candidate that wants to be president is going to have to acknowledge that, and then any candidate that actually becomes president is going to have to keep going with some version of the new order.
Certainly. I think that's one of the most important things that President Trump has done in exposing these truths about China and about, the deep state that these global elites wanted to hide from the average person. Now, we just saw the Pentagon and the GOP establishment reflexively call for a militaristic response to the 2 oil tankers that were bombed recently off Iran's coast, despite many conflicting reports by the Iranians and Japanese. How, in your view, should our leaders prudentially respond to threats like this?
I'll be interested to hear Michael Anton respond. Before he does, I'll just say that, from my perspective, this was one of the clearer cut cases because Iran had engaged in mining activities before, and because certain Iranian elements were kind of trumpeting this kind of thing. They were saying, if we can't use the strait, then no one can. And given that, and given kind of the absence of other theories really being floated in any serious way, it seemed to me like Iran was very likely the culprit.
Well, look, I don't trust the Iranians at all. I have absolutely believe, and I think I know, that the Iranian regime, the people in charge of the country, are anti-American and act against American interests consistently and have since the revolution in 1979. However, I'm curious about this. I'm not convinced that these tanker attacks were launched by the Iranians. And it's interesting to me that one of the owners of one of the tankers, the Japanese tanker, has disputed the claim that they were struck by a mine. So I still don't think we know what happened. And I have to say, I wonder, look, you have to try to think about this from the Iranian perspective, right? If you're Iran and you sink an
Yeah, one thing that springs out to me is that, yeah, you had these rumors swirling around in the immediate aftermath, but no counter-narrative really appeared. So, sure, you had people you had people raising doubts, but frankly, they weren't people who would be in a position to make determinations in the first place. If your vessel has an explosion racket, that doesn't mean that you know who delivered that explosive. And, in this respect, it's like, who else? Given that Iran has been involved in these activities for so long. OV says, Iran has been 2 years away from nukes for decades now as well. Well, I think that, their nuclear capabilities or how close they are is exaggerated, and exaggerated for practical purposes. You always want to be safe in that regard if you're a country that depends on Iran not getting these nukes. That being said, I don't think it's like far-fetched to imagine Iran getting nukes. The Pakistanis managed it, and given enough time, Iran should be able to produce nukes.
An oil tanker in the Persian Gulf, and everybody in the United States and the rest of the world knows it was you. You're putting yourself out there. You're putting yourself in a position where you're going to be retaliated against in a significant way. That's probably going to be painful. Remember, there was a time when the Iranians.
Well, it's not like that hasn't happened before. It's not like they haven't put themselves in that position before. Of course, like that's Operation Praying Mantis. Let me see if I can get this in better form for you guys. Like, this was exactly what happened back then. Was that Iran was mining the Gulf and ultimately was attacked, and that attack was a loss for Iran, tactically speaking, but by no means did it destroy Iran, and Iran was at that time in a much more precarious situation. So it's not unbelievable at all, just given the past track record and the attitude of the Iranians that they would engage in such behavior. Why not? It's not like it's unlikely that it's going to alone cause them to be destroyed. There were plenty of opportunities to do such things that were not taken. And so for Iran, you have a lot of backstops where if the U.S. was unwilling to knock down Syria, how could it be that they'd be willing to knock down Iran when Iran is a much riskier play than trying to knock down Syria? It just doesn't make a lot of sense from any perspective. If someone is folding with a given hand, then in a much weaker position, they are overwhelmingly likely to fold. And that's the kind of analysis that I think the Iranians are capable of, or whether or not they're capable of it, they're acting like that's the calculus they're operating under.
Harassed global shipping in the Persian Gulf in the 1980s, right? When they were sort of feeling their oats after the 1979 revolution. Mm-hmm. And the United States eventually responded in a coordinated naval attack against the Iranian Navy and small boats in 1986, and sank about half of the Iranian Navy in a very.
Keep in mind that half of the Iranian Navy is not a very large fleet. So let me see if we can find the deaths that Iran suffered. So I'm seeing about 56, maybe 60 deaths, call it, that Iran suffered as a result of this. The U.S. suffered 2 when their helicopter crashed in a fairly in a non-combat accident. So yeah, that's something that Iran can stomach. Iran has suffered a lot more than that in supporting the Assad during the Syrian civil war. In fact, vastly more than that. And so you'd expect that a rather less belligerent America would this time go like way further than they did back during those days. Doesn't seem like a call that I would make. Probably not a call that the Iranians would make either.
operation. And the Iranians learned their lesson and backed, first of all, all of a sudden they didn't have quite the same amount of assets anymore that they could use to harass shipping. They got very cautious about it. But I think they remember that lesson. And, it's like, the old adage about dogs who chase cars. Well, what happens when you catch the car, right? They actually sank a tanker. Have they not thought through what would happen next? I bet that they're not dumb. I bet they have. So what is their goal? Is it to provoke some kind of military response or a naval response or something? It seems unlikely.
Well, they're under sanction right now, and they're losing revenue, and so their attitude might be fairly simply, if we can't use it, no one can use it, and they've said that. I'm not guessing that that's their attitude. There have been prominent Iranian officials who have said exactly this. Does it make sense? Well, apparently it made a lot of sense because they managed to carry out the attack without a strike being carried out on them, and that's a demonstration of strength. The other attack on Saudi Arabia was another case where they could carry out an attack and not have a response, or at least a direct physical response. That's another indication of strength. On the other hand, their diplomatic situation gets weakened when they do this, and so the support of Europe weakens. The support of the countries that they need in order to break sanctions weakens. So the game has as many levels, but the Iranians are not going to be very happy, and they're going to want to spread the pain around.
To me. Now, again, I could be wrong. This could be the Iranians. I'd like to see, I'd like to know, but I think we all need to kind of be cautious and just take a pill here and wait and see what we can learn before we do anything rash or crazy.
Right, and you have conflicting perspectives in the White.
That I'll definitely agree with. It was a very good call on the part of the president to avoid a direct strike. That's a very risky thing to do, and a limited strike is unlikely to produce great results when the Iranians are using the defense equipment that they now have. One moment, I'm going to be right back. I have to get myself a new pair of headphones. My headphones are running out of battery. One of the downsides of such a setup. But let me just get something else going for you guys in the meanwhile.
White House with John Bolton as one of those who are more willing to go to war, in the Middle East. When do you think war is justified, and when should we exercise precaution?
Is justified, obviously, in direct defense of the national interest. But I mean, I don't know that war would be justified over. Well, even if the Iranians did sink an oil tanker, I think all the nations that have an interest in seeing the Strait of Hormuz open and in unharassed, free shipping in and out of that sea lane could coordinate a response that dealt with.
All right, here I am again. See if I can get this working. Oh, hi guys. Just need to get my machine working again. So yeah, I think that broadly speaking, it's very wise indeed for the U.S. to take a tack, which is a lot more hesitant to use direct force, because the economic force is just so remarkably strong. Whenever you look at how well U.S. economic pressure works, you end up being, in my opinion, astounded. U.S. soft power and U.S. Economic power, it has a lot less downsides, and I think can constitute a lot more leverage on countries that don't believe that you're going to go through the incredible investment of actually knocking them over completely. That's proven very costly, and in a country like Iran, it's going to be even more costly than Iraq.
The Iranian specific means to threaten shipping. I think that would be an appropriate response. I don't know. I hear a lot of people, many of whom I know, are worried that there's a cabal or something trying to gin up a wider ground war with Iran. I actually don't believe that. I hope in any event that it's not true, because I think a ground war with Iran would be a total disaster, and it's hard for me to understand what would justify the United.
Oh, we just lost sound. Let me see if I can get that working again. Audio output capture. Here we go. There we go. Now it should work. Testing.
Apart from
Yeah.
If they wanted to, they could fund terrorists to bomb sites in the U.S., I suppose, which is something that we've actually been worried about for 30 years, and we think the Iranians have the capability to do, but so far as we know, they've never done it.
Right.
If they were doing things like that, and that would be another thing. We'd have to really consider it. But as long as they're not projecting power at U.S. homeland, even if they are projecting power against U.S. interests, then you deal with that in the most limited way you can to isolate and eliminate the threat, but without overextending yourself, is the way I see it.
Absolutely, I agree.
We thank you for joining us today on Right on Point. Before we continue with the second half of our show, we hope we've sparked your interest to visit our website, rightonpointpodcast.com, where you can listen to previous episodes and interviews, contact us, and learn more about the program. As you scroll down our homepage, please consider making a contribution to our show. There are options to either make a one-time payment or to become a monthly donor through Patreon or PayPal. Both options are equally appreciated. Even a small one-time contribution goes a long way. Right on Point runs exclusively off of your generosity. Each payment.
There you go. Subscribe to these folks. After all, they did provide this content. Here we go.
Writ large, the famous Churchill phrase that, although Churchill didn't use it in this context, but Strauss did, that the moderns built on low but solid ground.
Someone's
in other words,
here.
They gave up.
Hey there, how's it going? Yeah, hello. OV. Yeah, hello.
Can you hear me, Kyle?
I can hear you. Speak again, please. Hello? Oh, God. I think I know what's wrong here. Oh, okay. So, he was not getting sound to the Hangout. Yeah, so my mic was occupied by the OBS, but now I've got it heading into.
All right, there we go. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, speak again.
Yeah, can you hear
Perfect. Yeah, you're great. So,
all right, cool.
OB, for those who don't know, is a friend of many, foe of many. Let me see if I can get his avatar in here. He's quite a figure in these parts. Let's see if I can get it. Yeah.
A distant cousin of Duvid, as some would call me.
Yeah. So, what do you want to discuss?
So, I mean, you brought up this example of back in 1988, Iran, might have attacked some of these tankers, and therefore they have this track record. I mean, back in what was it? What year did the Gulf of Tonkin happen?
The 60s, right? I mean,
yeah,
early 60s.
Early mid 60s, something like that. And we've now established that that
it was a false. That it was at least at the very least a very dubious project.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So in the case of this, I think that what makes it different is that the Iranians aren't like the North Vietnamese were very loudly saying that this was a false flag. The Iranians, on the other hand, maybe some of them are saying that, but others are saying, yeah, we did it and we're proud of it. Not in the case of the mines, but in the case, I believe, of earlier events. There are elements of Iran that are very muscular and very vocal about their intention and the fact that they're proud of these sorts of activities.
So, who exactly are these figures that are proud of these activities?
IRGC spokesman, mostly.
Okay. So they're not actually prominent members in the government. These are just kind of like ancillary figures.
Sure, but the government could silence them if it chose. It's
right.
It's not like it's just anyone can call themselves that and get on Iranian media labeled as that, right? Like if some random person off the street tried to label themselves that and get on Iranian media, they'd get in trouble.
So how is this in any way congruent with? I mean, you mentioned my comment a little bit earlier about Iran has been 2 years away from nukes for decades now. I mean, the major figures in the Iranian government are very adamant that they are not wanting to look for nuclear solutions.
Oh yeah,
So I mean, how
that
is
I
that?
think that they have to say that. Like you can't say that and then be under the IAEA aegis for your nuclear program. Their nuclear program has stated peaceful purposes, and those peaceful purposes are genuine. It's just that any program that can fulfill those purposes can be turned very rapidly into a weapons making program should the political winds change. Similar to the Japanese policy, they have like a lot of material sitting around that could be made into a nuke should they choose. It's kind of a weapon in being, and Iran wants that capability. It doesn't necessarily want to create nukes. It wants to be on the cusp of nuclear capability, very logically.
Right. So okay. So there's a couple of different issues with that. And so how are you saying that the Iranians just are being more tactful than another group like the North Koreans? Because the North Koreans have no problem saying that yes, we are going for nukes because nukes are a great deterrent.
Wait, can you find me North Koreans saying that before they detonated a device, and in particular during the periods where they were under the most pressure in order to make a deal? During those periods, can you find me North Korean officials saying, "Yeah, we want a nuke, and we're going to go for a nuke the moment we can"?
When have the Iranians ever said that
They
yes, we
haven't.
are going for a nuke?
They haven't. They're not in that stage. You only say that you're going for a nuke when you have it, right? You don't say that before. You don't say that in
So
the period where you could be stopped.
you do assume that the North Koreans already have a nuke, is what you're saying.
The North Koreans do already have a nuke. They've detonated nukes multiple times.
I mean, allegedly, to be honest.
No,
But
I'm fully confident that they have detonated a nuke because it's not really profitable for the South Koreans to lie about that, for instance. Like, and it's also not great. Like, there are a number of people who are not extremely happy about North Korean nukes. China numbers among them. China is
oh, of course.
China is both directly threatened by these nukes, and they represent a casus belli for the U.S. To implement a lot of force projection on the Korean Peninsula. So the Chinese
Sure.
don't like that. But like
Sure.
everyone is saying, yeah, there was a detonation.
So, well, okay. So this brings me back to something that you said earlier about the practical application of exaggeration. That's kind of a paraphrase. You said actually the direct quote was um, exaggerated for practical purposes. So, I mean,
I don't quite remember the context of that. What was I saying? What was I saying that about?
something about how yes, it was the comment you made directly after I said that Iran has been 2 years away from nukes for decades now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah.
So
So
I
it makes
mean,
sense for say Israel to say that Iran is closer than they are because if you underestimate the time that Iran has to make a nuke, then you're kind of or if you overestimate the pace, then you're in the clear. If you underestimate it, then you're in trouble, right? So you always want to
well,
be overestimating Iranian capabilities as someone who's threatened by Iranian nukes.
at what point do we say that Israeli fears are unfounded?
Um, you would say that
I
Iranian,
mean,
you
how
say
many
that Israeli
decades?
fears are unfounded if
Real quick, Let me just clarify.
go
How
ahead.
many decades have to go by before we can say that maybe Iran is not actively seeking a nuclear deterrent?
Sure.
How many
If
decades have to
Iran
go by?
were to get rid of all of its centrifuges on the promise that they would receive, say, lots of stockpiles of medical isotopes, which is what they claim their program is for. If they were to say, "Hey, we'll give up all these centrifuges if you just give us a huge stockpile of medical isotopes," in that case, I would say that Israel would be kind of foolish to believe that Iran's current government was aiming at a nuke.
Yeah, but it's not just medical isotopes that Iran is looking for, right? They're also wanting to build nuclear reactors, which Russia is actively helping them with right now.
Well, actually, that was where they actually gave up the most, was that they filled their heavy water reactor with concrete. Uh, they didn't do a similar thing with all their centrifuges. They maintained a lot of centrifuges in idle status that could be restarted, but they did fill their heavy water reactor with concrete, which I think makes sense from the non-proliferation standpoint because I think that the heavy water reactor is perhaps perhaps in some ways an easier path. Like I think that the Koreans got their nukes that way,
Right. Yeah.
and it may be less
I'm not just.
detectable. It may be like
I'm
harder to see exactly how much progress they've made on that front.
right. I mean, you do agree that even if you're going for nuclear energy, there are certain, I don't know if you want to call them gray areas, where some material could be applied for nuclear reactors, but they could also be applied for nuclear weapons as well.
Well, yes, and okay. One thing is that people drastically overestimate the extent to which you can have a so-called peaceful program, because whenever you're producing neutrons, you can make plutonium, and plutonium can make bombs. So there's no nuclear power without proliferation capability. That's just a myth. Now, that being said, if you just want power, then you could kind of outsource the enrichment process and the managing of the reactor to someone else. But Iran would consider that a breach of its sovereignty to have reactors that are completely controlled by another country, kind of like an embassy status within their country. They're not aiming at that. They want sovereignty, and that's understandable. Of course, anyone would want sovereignty. But the point is that they've gone through a fair amount of pain in order to, in the past, in order to maintain things that they could point to and say, if they build this infrastructure out fully, they'll have credible capability to rush to a nuke in fairly short order.
So why haven't they done that?
Well, they've traded away their capability for economic benefits. That which and they haven't done that because they've run into difficulties with their program. It's not that easy to build nukes, and they face the threat of direct intervention. They want to do the thing that the Pakistan eschewed. If you recall, one of the chapters in world history was when Pakistan was on the eve of their nuclear tests. The U.S. came and offered them a huge aid package in order to stop, but the president said, I can't do it. My country would never accept me if I did that. So Iran has kind of taken that deal, and although they now regret it, and said we'll sign this away in exchange for more economic capabilities. After all, that allows you to build a more fulsome backbone, because you don't just need the nukes, you also need kind of the muscle underneath it. You need delivery systems. You need geographic projection. You need all sorts of things in order to make it a more credible deterrent.
No, that's well. I mean, you're half right. You do need the muscle underneath it. You do need the delivery capabilities, which is something that Iran has actively been pursuing. But the when you say that you need geographic projection, no, that's the whole point of nukes, is that you don't need to have projection power outside of your own nation. I mean, that's the whole point
It
of
certainly helps.
intercontinental ballistic missiles, right?
Right, but the longer range the missiles, the less of them you have. That was the intermediate range nuclear missile crisis. Was it IMCT? It was something like that.
Yeah,
There was a big
but
crisis
I
along
mean,
these lines, because the shorter the range of the missile, the more you can build. And in the case of Iran, their highest achievement is probably going to be intermediate range, but they're not going to have that many of them, and it's better to have outposts closer. That's just strictly better, because
so
that
are
allows
you
more
kind of
capability to attack the defenses and overwhelm them.
yeah, but here's the thing, right? Let's look at the places that we could plausibly assume where Iran is establishing outposts, right? You got what, like Syria is the farthest west, right? Syria
Lebanon,
or Iraq, right? Huh? Lebanon, yes, I mean same thing, same general area, right? It's not
yeah, that's
really
right
that
next to Israel,
tactically of difference.
bordering
Yeah.
Israel. Yeah,
Right. Okay. So I mean that's your benchmark, right? Is how close are these missiles to Israel?
and how
And
many of them there are? Sure, yeah, those are both important.
but I mean,
Like
the
like
the
to
the
be
dis-
clear, the closer you are, the more missiles you can build, because it's a lot cheaper to build short range missiles than long range missiles.
so well, I mean, we're kind of getting into a little bit of technical tactics right now.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but like I don't really see a huge strategic difference between if Iran, well, first off, Iran has Syria is a strategically um, unstable area, right? Iran, or I'm sorry, Israel is launching airstrikes all the time into Syria,
Yep.
right? So I mean, I don't
At
really
Iranian
see.
forces mostly, or
Right.
so it is claimed.
So that this entire idea of Iran needs, geographic, projection power. Like
It certainly
it goes.
helps.
I mean, if we're actually looking at the science of ICBMs, the flight time between Syria and Iran is negligible. The defense
Well, first of all,
mechanisms.
for a defense, it's non-negligible. It's a lot easier to defend uh, if you have fewer and longer range ones. It forces a different trajectory. There are all sorts of reasons why it's better to have people only be able to launch long range rather than short range. The problem of short range defense is ferociously hard. You have just vastly compressed times of engagement.
Right. Yeah. But
I mean,
but
I'm not saying
we're
I'm not saying that this is strictly necessary for Iran to have a deterrent. I'm just saying that it helps. It's not the case that
no,
Iran could get
that's not what
along.
I'm arguing.
Yeah, sure.
I'm saying yes. Obviously, Iran would want to have a deterrent, but the point that I'm disputing is that they would need to have a deterrent in Syria or in Iraq, or
And the
in the
need part is the
surrounding
issue.
areas.
I don't dispute that they don't need it. I'm saying that it helps.
Well, yeah, but yeah. I mean, you're familiar with the differences between, an intermediate ICBM versus long range, right?
Yep.
Right. So I mean, if you're
And
talking about
you're aware of the extreme amount of furor that developed over the intermediate missile because of the strategic significance of that class of missile.
right,
If the
yeah,
Soviet Union and America were closer together, then short range would have fallen into that slot because, like, it's just as you get shorter range, you just get to more capacity in terms of throw weight, in terms of the number of missiles that you can deliver, and in terms of the time of engagement. It's
right.
not by no means necessary, but helpful.
But here's the problem with your argument is that even if you're talking about distances from Iran to Europe, that is still classified as intermediate distance.
Okay.
So so
I'm
if
saying
we're
that the
talking
lower the
about if
range, the
we're
worse the situation for the defender. And I'm
sure,
saying
yeah,
that
I
yeah,
don't disagree with that. I don't
right.
disagree with that.
So
But
so
but we're
we seem
already
to agree on all the direct points.
no, not necessarily. I mean, we already agree that intermediate range is already a problem, and Iran has. I mean, just the distance from Iran to Israel is technically within the intermediate
Intermediate range
distance.
is a problem, yes. It would be better for the Israel if it was still longer range, but uh, that doesn't mean that as it gets shorter, it's not more problematic. And you should also, the analogy works even better than you're making out because you're making out like the circumstances of the Soviets and the Americans are directly analogous. The analogy has to be applied on a much smaller scale. Iranian industry is much more capable of delivering lots of short range rockets than lots of intermediate range rockets, in the same way that the Soviet industry was more capable of delivering lots of intermediate rockets rather than lots of global range ICBMs.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about the Russian-U.S. connection, the whole point of Russia having missiles in Cuba was so that they could have an intermediate range throughout all of the lower 48 states, right?
Sorry?
So yeah, it's the whole point.
Yeah.
The whole point.
Yeah, and for Iran, it serves the same purpose to have short and intermediate range missiles in order to have the range to strike their primary adversary. Um, and incidentally, probably the way that we're
What I'm
probably
saying is
shortchanging things is
you're still
focusing too
missing
much
the
on
point.
Israel.
Short range nukes are kind of almost irrelevant.
Why? Why
I
would
mean,
that be the case?
well, first off, you have to look at the
And also, like, it's not
the
like
strategic.
you need
The,
nukes necessarily. You just need a way
right.
to attack and overwhelm defenses, and
Well,
short range
yeah,
missiles do that just
sure,
as well as long range missiles.
sure, yeah, but I mean, we have to look at the stability of it all, right? The strategic stability, right? If Iran were to actually, I mean, you've already admitted that investing in nukes is a costly and complex endeavor. So the idea that Iran would invest that kind of money, or whatever you want to call it, that put that kind of investment into a strategically unstable environment such as the Syria. I mean, it's not even feasible from the
Wait,
get-go.
wait. What's not feasible? Putting investments in Syria? They're doing that.
Putting nuclear investments in Syria, yeah.
Oh, well, first of all, like you would not do that until very late in the game if you were to do that. What you would
What do
do
you mean?
is
Define late in the game.
like if you were aiming at a preemptive strike and you wanted to overwhelm defenses and you wanted to be sure of a hit, you might do some clandestine thing where you smuggle some nukes close to Israel and then strike. But I think that the much more likely scenario is that you use the conventional weapons close to Israel to overwhelm the defenses as you're shooting the much longer range nukes,
But
which
the
are
whole
stored in
point
a much more secure location.
the whole point of being preemptive is not to wait until late in the game, right? It's kind of an early setup.
No, I'm talking about late in the game in some sort of confrontation. Like tensions rise and they rise to kind of a boiling point. You saw this with the Soviet Union and America. It's not like nuclear war is as likely to break out in every scenario. So as tensions rise, you may find you may find that your only hope or your main hope is to launch a preemptive strike. At that point, you have a lot of leeway in terms of how you do it. So you may want to move nukes close. Although I agree that that's not the most likely scenario. Most likely, you just use your close-in assets in order to try to suppress and overwhelm the air defenses of your and the missile defenses of your opponent, so that your long-range nuke can come in. Because you want to keep your long-range nukes as safe as possible, unless something weird is happening.
Well, so now we're kind of getting into I don't know if you want to call it meta geopolitics, but
But
I
what's the
mean we're
primary
kind of
disagreement here? I don't think that you've advanced a thesis counter to mine. You've sort of nibbled at the edges, and I'm interested in what your main
yeah,
objection is.
no, that's true. That is true. I am nibbling at the edges. Like, Iran's geopolitics is not really like the starting off point that I would go from. But I mean, from a certain point of view, it is important. What the whole point is, why would Iran even feel the need to set up these preemptive, or whatever you want to call it, these kind of situations in the first place?
Oh, because Israel is a strategic adversary. Because Iran seeks security, and security is often found through a lot of influence in your neighbors. Like, for example, why are lots of countries involved in expanding their spheres of influence? It buttresses you against the winds of political change. Iran wants to be as safe as possible, as unpressured as possible, in terms of its ability to secure its local environment. So in a world where Iran does not have this influence on Syria and Lebanon and Iraq, Iran seems less secure to me.
So, but I mean, we're kind of getting into a chicken or the egg question, right? Um,
So wait.
is
Let me try to summarize. Are you saying that the reason why Iran is doing all these things is Israeli aggression?
Yes, yeah, I'd be
Right.
happy with that.
I think that that's a fairly unreasonable take. And the reason why is just look at the Islamic Republic of Iran's relations with other parties. They've alienated,
What other parties?
during various points of their history, they've made pretty much everyone pissed off at them, from the Soviets to the
Wait,
Americans to the Iraqis. They've been extremely
wait a second. Wait a
belligerent.
second. You're bringing up a whole many different cans of worms you're opening up right now.
I'm
So let's
saying that
be clear
that
here.
that when you have a country that like Iran, which is at various points seriously alienated both major powers, and this country is expanding its sphere of influence, it seems quite odd to say that it bears no responsibility for other countries viewing it as a threat. That just seems very odd to me.
So So you're saying that Iran has pissed off Russia at times during the history. So why is Russia pretty strident in their defense of Iran nowadays?
Why was America looking to become an Iranian ally in terms of shifting its alignment more west with Barack Obama's diplomatic offensive? Why? because you always want to
I mean,
expand your sphere of
well,
influence.
that's not anything new. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the Shah of Iran and Operation
Right,
Ajax, right?
right, and it was the overthrow of the Shah and the imprisonment of the embassy people, the American embassy people, that started the shall we say belligerent relationship between Iran and the U.S. But in the long run,
Well,
everyone wants to expand the sphere of influence. What I'm saying is that
and
the
well,
country
well,
has
actually,
acted
no,
in
wait,
pretty belligerent
hold on.
ways, and
This
it's
actually
odd to
this
say that
actually
they
brings
bear no responsibility
yeah.
for
I
that
mean,
image.
when you bring up Obama, I mean that brings up. I mean that's another can of worms that you're opening up. I mean, how do you feel about Obama walking out on Bibi when he was giving a speech to the Congress?
Believe it or not, I don't much care. One thing that I liked about Obama was his back down from striking Syria. I think that it was a wise move to back down from striking Syria. Incidentally, it is one of the primary pieces of evidence I use to decry the anti-Semitic theory that the U.S. is ruled by Israel in foreign policy. The U.S. could have very easily pushed over Assad at that point before the Russians came in and refused to. This was not in Israel's interest, but I think it was the right thing to do. I think that Assad represents and represented a bulwark against Islamist rule in Syria, and
Yeah,
quite
but
a horrid rule at that.
that's funny that you say that because I forget who it was, whether it was Bibi himself or one other spokesman of the Israeli government. They said that they would rather have ISIS rather than Assad
Oh, for
in
sure,
power.
and that's why they were for striking Assad,
No, but
because
you're contradicting yourself. I
no,
mean,
I'm
either
not.
you're
You're
wrong,
assuming
either
you're
you're
assuming
wrong
that
or the
I'm
Israeli
an
government
Israeli
is wrong.
cutout. You're assuming that I'm an Israeli cutout. I disagree with Israeli foreign
No,
policy on Syria, and I've made that
wait,
clear
but
multiple times.
you just said you. Oh, okay, okay, fine. That's fair enough. All right. As long as you're in agreement that you do disagree with the Israeli stated foreign policy.
On this regard, yes,
I mean, so
and on many
how does
regards,
that make you
frankly.
feel though? I mean, how does that make you feel?
Uh,
I mean, how do
I
you
don't
interpret that?
like it,
Like
but
if
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah,
I'm
I
not
mean,
monomaniacally focused on Israel as as regards Syria. I don't think that the country is encapsulated by its policy towards Syria.
but isn't that I mean, aren't we kind of getting into the I don't know inner workings of like why would the Israeli government say that it's better if ISIS is in charge?
Because they're at war with Syria, and the Syrian government is a much more effective
No,
foe
they're
than ISIS.
well. Okay, so but I mean, for a long time, Syria has been pretty neutral towards Israel, right? The obviously, yes, the Middle East has been a powder keg for a long time. Even going back to 1947. But
Wait,
like under
but you have to consider that things change as Iran invests more in Syria, and as Syria is forced to consider Iran's interests. Things do change, and it has always been Israeli policy
when did
to
Iran?
not be in favor of the strengthening of countries they're at war with, which I think is reasonable. It's just that in a global sense, in the case of American interest, I don't think it suits American interest to have Al Qaeda rule Syria, and I think that the humanitarian factor is important in and of itself.
So when would you say that Iran's investment into Syria really became um, a, a stated policy?
I'm not sure about a stated policy, but there was serious support from the beginning, I believe. And
What do you mean
in
from
addition to
the?
that,
What do you mean from the beginning?
in,
What year are we talking about?
I'm talking about I think that Iran supported the regime from the beginning of hostilities in much more minor ways than it ultimately
What
did.
year are we talking about?
We're talking about the beginning of the Syrian civil war, which I believe was 2013.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah.
Now,
So
be,
you
I don't think
think
that
all
there
right?
was
So
No, they've been involved for quite a bit longer.
okay, yeah, involved, but in terms of helping in the Syrian civil war, they were helping from the first day. Is what I'm saying.
right, and here's the thing, right? So yeah, are you saying that was Iran building up forces in Syria before the civil war happened?
I don't believe. Well, I don't. I haven't heard of that. It would not shock me if there was some sort of cooperation, but I don't believe that there was a buildup of the sort that's happening now.
Sure. Right, right. And that's the whole point, right? I mean, we're kind of, you're putting the cart before the horse here, right? Iran's real investment into the Syrian, so-called civil war, which I don't even believe it's a civil war. I think it's kind of a CIA kind of operation. The whole Arab
That doesn't
Spring
preclude
thing.
it being a civil war, of course. The American, well, any civil
But
war is going
okay,
to have
here's the thing.
external actors who are trying to force their will upon it. But
Are you
I think that the
saying? Are you
rebels have
saying?
proved have at various points, rebel groups have proved their independence, much to the chagrin of the CIA.
Right. So are you saying that the Civil War would have actually happened if there was no CIA involvement?
No CIA involvement. Actually, probably, yeah. I
I
don't think
mean,
that the
do you
CIA
really,
was the primary
I mean,
benefactor.
come
I
on.
think that
Let's
the
let's be
various Gulf countries were involved in a very serious way. For
all right,
example,
right. So I mean, do you remember the official reason for why the Civil War started? There was some random farmers in Syria that were upset about global warming. There was a drought and global
yeah, I
warming,
don't
and
think so. That sounds
yeah,
like American
yeah.
spin. That's not.
No, well, I mean,
There were
no, it's not
protests
just
against the government.
American
These
spin.
protests were motivated
That's
by
the
various
stated.
things. Much of the energy
That's
behind the protest was Islamist, as always in such countries. And so
so. Why
there
would
was.
why would Israel be
Why would Israel
happier
prefer
with
Islamists?
Islamists in charge?
Because
Yeah,
they're not as effective opposition as the Syrian government. The
yeah, but
Syrian Arab Army has always been the lion within its cage. There's never been a
oh, you mean
force.
they defend their own borders?
There's
They
never. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're the most powerful force within the borders of Syria.
so who's the real aggressor then?
I would say that
It's
the forces
definitely
that are
Israel,
supporting the Syrian rebels
right?
are the aggressors. So yeah, I would say that the aggressors are the people supporting the rebels. Like that would include the Gulf countries,
Well, that
Israel,
would
and
include the
America.
Israeli government.
Yeah, but not primarily. Like I don't think that
I
they
mean,
supported.
so you
I don't think that they
understand. You
supported
understand
the rebels.
why.
But wait, wait,
You
wait, wait.
understand why the
In
BDS
terms of
government or why the
aggressors,
BDS
like
movement comes around. I mean,
in terms
if
of
Israeli
aggressors,
government is
Ovi,
supporting these rebels and the rebels are the true aggressors, then you would understand why Iran or the BDS movement or any of these numerous factions would have a problem with Israeli politics.
well, obviously they'd have a problem with Israeli politics, but more broadly than
But
that,
for good reason,
Israel
not for
was
no reason
was
either. It's not just
Israel
for no
has the
reason.
the most legitimate reason, being at war with Syria, to support the rebels as opposed to the rest of the people. And in terms of Israel's interests are served by
No,
opposing
wait,
the
no,
Syrian
no,
government.
no,
I don't
no.
think that
See,
Israel has a
the
responsibility to
biggest,
be.
no,
I wish that
Syria
Israel
has
would
never.
rise above these considerations and try to build a better path forward that does not involve the Alawites being slaughtered by rebels. I don't think that Israel is evil or unduly aggressive in supporting this large scale effort by her allies to overthrow the Syrian government.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? I mean, the biggest contention that Syria and Israel had was over the Golan Heights, which they still have. But I mean, Syria never had a problem with Israel existing, per se,
Well,
right?
they did have a problem with Israel with Israel's existence. They were part of the coalition against Israel.
Yeah, but we're talking
When
about,
they captured
like
Israelis, they slaughtered them. They were not very happy with Israel being on their border. They were not thrilled about it. They were never thrilled about it.
yeah. I mean, well, who doesn't have a problem with Israel, right?
Obviously, the
I
people
mean,
on
Israel is
the
just
people who
tough
are
love.
bordering a Zionist project in a place region with burgeoning nationalism, they're not going to be happy about this Zionist project in their midst. How could they be?
What is your opinion then on the Golan Heights? Do you think that Syria should have the Golan Heights or Israel?
Israel, of course. I mean, okay. You're asking me in terms of Israeli interests. You're asking me in terms of what I wish would happen in terms of geopolitics. You're asking me in
Yeah,
terms of what
I mean,
Syria's interests are.
what is the best for stability of the region?
I think that Israel just keeps what it has and tries not to get further involved. But I don't think that the stability of the region is served by Israel giving anything up at the moment.
So you really think that if Syria
I
had
think
the
giving something
chance,
up would be a sign of weakness and would invite like further measures on the part of the Iranians and the Syrians.
so are you saying that Syria, given the chance, Syria would launch an offensive into Israel to try and wipe it off the map, so to speak?
Well, that's very far from now in terms of the balance of forces on the ground. But if that was viable, I certainly believe that Syria would lend forces to that effort. If like there was a region scale effort, and it looked like those forces were winning, I think for sure that Syrian forces would invest in that effort. Yeah, as they did before.
Yeah. Okay. So name me a um, a reasonable situation where Syria could invest, whether it's finances or whether it's actual armed forces, where Syria could take over Israel.
Well, it would have to be a large scale war where people like Egypt got involved, like primarily Egypt, I guess, if you had a revival of the war with Egypt, and if you had support from like large scale support of Iran to Lebanon and Syria at the same time, you could see an attempt to undermine Israeli security that way and undermine it piecemeal,
Yeah.
where you'd be trying to first sort of degrade the quality of life and the security of the state in order to try to induce people to leave. Kind of the South African situation. If you recall, the South Africans were never defeated
South
militarily.
Africa.
Yeah, the South Africans were never defeated militarily, and they had nukes. But ultimately, it was just made so uncomfortable that they decided to capitulate politically. That's, I think, what you would aim at, and you would use
Yeah,
military pressure to do that.
and it's funny that you bring up the South Africans because you're kind of missing the kind of subtext that I'm bringing up, right? I mean, if Israel couldn't be defeated back in the 1940s or the 1950s or 60s, when they had much less American support. I mean, do you think that Israel is really threatened today by Syria or Lebanon or Egypt, who are, I mean, Egypt is basically an American client state as well. Um, I mean, this is the issue is
You
that
could
there
see a
is
progressive degradation
no
where forces like
direct
you're seeing active support of Hamas by Iran, for instance. This could grow into broader support. You could see repetitions of the Lebanese conflicts. You could see various ways to put the squeeze on Israel. And what's your issue with the South African analogy? I think that the South African analogy is what applies here. That's where
the
the point of the sword is for Israel.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, my problem with the South African analogy is that the black opposition forces against the white, apartheid government was supported by Israel or supported by
broadly
Jews.
speaking, broadly speaking, Israel was an ally of South Africa. CERN, if you can back me up here or disagree, I
Oh,
believe that.
this is yeah,
Real
that's well known.
quick,
The Israel and South Africa were
Judas,
Wait,
cooperating.
let's CERN speak. I don't want to overwhelm anything, but I just want to let CERN speak when he speaks. He doesn't speak that often. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty well known that South Africa and Israel were allying or I guess cooperating pretty closely, um, and that's like just historical fact.
Go ahead, Ovi.
the apartheid government.
Yes, yes.
Then how do you explain the what do they call it? I forget the name. But there was a very prominent Jewish spokesman that spoke out against the apartheid government. Spoke for the the African something League or a something L. I don't know. Chat would know.
Was he an Israeli government official or just a
No,
random
but
Jewish
but
intellectual?
no, yeah, but here's the thing, right? Is that Barbara Lerner Specter is not an official government spokesman either, and yet look at the influence that she has in Europe.
I just want to say that
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
a bit.
By the way, just
there
Go
are
ahead.
plenty of
real quick before you go on, Judas Starchai or Judas Flychai is wanting to come on. If you want to drop the link in Hangouts or in the chat for him to
I
come
think
on
I
the
think
Hangout.
I just dropped it. So you can go back and find it.
Yeah, Judas can maybe drop it one more time. So I don't know if because the Hangouts will or the chat will disappear after a while. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know.
Judas, the link is in the chat already.
Yeah.
If you want to jump on.
Let's just continue the conversation. People can join if they want. I'm not upset with where the conversation is going right now.
All right, Judas says link. Judas will be on.
Yeah. I don't think it's accurate to read much into Israel by looking at random Jewish individuals. For example, many of the harshest critics of Israel today are American Jews.
Yeah, and
So the equivalence doesn't work.
what do you mean my equivalence?
The equivalent doesn't work. Where you're saying where you're trying to equate opposition of Jews to South Africa with opposition of Israel to South Africa. There are Jews
No,
who are really at odds with Israeli politics or with
no,
Israeli policy.
it still works. The issue is not really. I mean, we have to keep in mind that there is a difference between um, Israeli politics and politics in Europe or politics in America, or broadly speaking, politics in white countries, right? Where Israel is more than happy, or Jews are more than happy to promote liberal multicultural politics in other countries. It's only when those multicultural politics come home to roost, in Israel, that it really becomes a problem, right? This
I
is
happen to know
why.
that Israeli liberals are quite vocal about the need to allow immigrants in and keep the refugees happy and all that sort of thing. So that politics is present in Israel, as I'm well aware.
The leftists, sure, yeah, I don't disagree with
And
that.
there
I
are a
mean,
lot
yeah,
of leftists in Israel. They're not very
yeah,
politically powerful at the moment because of the spate of attacks. The right has been empowered by that, but overall the left
right.
has historically been very big in Israeli politics, and is for peace and has made a lot of overtures in that direction. I don't think that Israel is that Israeli leftists are representative of some sort of double standard where they're super ethno nationalist at home, but
No, no,
advocate refugees abroad.
that is true. But here's the thing, right? Is that you will never get any Jew, whether they're a leftist or a conservative, to say that maybe Hitler was right. Maybe
That doesn't surprise me. You're not going to get most people to do that. You're not going to get people from any background really to do that on a regular basis.
right. Well, so here, let me put it another way, because that was kind of a flippant way to say it. But so okay, so leftist Jews will have a problem with the way that like the Haaretz or the Mondaweiss kind of argument that maybe we should be treating the Palestinians in the West Bank, or the Palestinians in the uh, what do you call it,
Gaza Strip.
where yeah, the Gaza, not just the Gaza Strip, but where all of the settlements are being built as well, right?
That would be the West Bank.
Yeah. So there's all of these different issues, and the problem with the leftists is that yes, they are very. You're right. They're not holding a double standard, but the standard that they hold is it was a tactic or a strategy that was meant for the Western white nations. It was meant for Europe. It was meant for America. It was meant for North America, right?
It was meant for everybody. It's not meant for a specific group of people. It's meant for the world. And you'll see the world excoriated.
That's Davidian of you to say.
Well, it is. I mean, it's not the case that let's say there's no condemnation when say India does something that goes against these principles. I think that the highest standard is accrued to the West, but that's not because it's some sort of plan to reduce Western power. They believe that through the application of these principles, you'll make people more powerful, more successful, etc.
Yeah, and that's why I think you're pretty naive, and that's why if I was an Israeli citizen, I would be. And by the way, welcome Judas. I would be more on the
Hi
side of
there.
Judas. I would be more on the side of the more conservative Orthodox Jews, saying like, yeah, get these fucking Palestinians out of Israel because they don't belong here. This is our land.
Well, I don't think in terms of Israeli citizens, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that the
Not
victory
why
for Israel is connected to a more liberal victory worldwide, where people just start to abide by certain standards, and that is happening. You are seeing sort of a liberalization of the world, a demilitarization. There are a lot less conflicts, and that is kind of how Israel
no,
would quote
that's
unquote
not even
win.
true. That's not even true. I
Well,
mean,
it's just a statistical fact that you're seeing a
no,
lot less
no, it's
conflict.
not. I mean, no. Hold on. I mean, I remember back before the 2003 Iraq War even happened, and the Democrats did that like I don't know, Million Man March or whatever they want to call it on Washington, protesting the Iraq War. You know, as when George Bush was in power, yeah, the liberals were all against the war, but then as soon as Obama came into power and all of the drone strikes started happening, all of the expanded war on terror started happening. Then all of a sudden, the Democrats had no problem with that. The liberals had no
By the
problem with
way,
that.
Clinton was not much of a pacifist himself. So yeah, you always see these double
And
standards.
neither Clinton, neither Bill
Yes,
nor Hillary.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, true. That's absolutely true. And you see absolutely double standards by the left in observing this. I
yeah.
will say
So
that
I
the
mean,
right similarly
see when
exhibits
you
double
so
standards on certain issues.
right, yeah. So, but I mean, that's the whole point, right? Is when you say that the liberalization of the world is leading to less war. I mean, that's factually incorrect.
That's factually correct. You're seeing, okay, regardless of what you ascribe the causality to, you're seeing a lot less war. I think it's due to the proliferation of technology primarily, but economic well-being to the world, and which includes various technologies and labor-saving devices and increases to the standard of living. I think that this is absolutely increasing obesity worldwide and making
That has nothing to do with
war
liberalism.
war a lot
You can
less.
you can
Well, it
have
does have to do with liberalism in the sense that it is avoided by countries like North Korea to a significant extent. So I call North Korea illiberal because of all of its illiberality. If you are kind of an autarky, if you're closed off, you can avoid this. But the rest of the countries that are, by comparison, liberalizing, they are seeing these gains.
yeah, but the problem with North Korea is not that they're illiberal. The problem is, like you said, the economic power of the sanctions.
That's due to their entire structure is due to illiberality, their rejection of liberal principles. Uh, I think that's pretty clear.
Wait, so how liberal is it really when the U.S. says play by our rules or we'll put you under sanctions? Is that a liberal mentality?
Yeah, when I say liberal, I'm talking about like essentially being for free markets, certain rights, and kind of a political structure which has certain kind of Western characteristics, basically, where you saw opposition to this in the form of fascism and communism, where they were like, hey, this stuff is whack, yo, we have our own way, but they ultimately collapsed. You see those three structures. I call them liberal, communist, fascist, and I claim that the liberal structure is overtaking the world, and that those who avoid the liberal structure keep it out in the way that North Korea did. They avoid a lot of the gains that we see, including gains in obesity, life expectancy, and kind of attitudes towards war and peace.
So, so what is your opinion? And by the way, I got to step away real quick, but real quick, I just want to ask you this: what is your opinion on Germany and Merkel's government are allowing, they're pretty liberal. They're allowing all of these refugees and all of these Turks and all of these Syrians, so-called refugees, quote unquote refugees, and Sweden as well, and France as well. And we see more and more terrorism happening in these countries,
Mm-hmm.
more and more, Muslim influence,
Yeah.
conservative influence. So, like, the more and more liberal that these countries become, more women in the
They invite
workplace.
conservatives. Yeah. I
Yeah,
don't
I
think that
mean,
that turns the tide, if that's what you're asking. It does slow
wait,
the it does not it does slow the liberalization, but I don't believe that it turns the tide. And the evidence for this, in my opinion, is
yeah,
the
but well,
the extremely fast liberalization of Muslim countries, where
yeah, but
yeah,
you're aware of the difference in birth rates between French women versus
yeah.
Muslim women. I wouldn't call them
But
French.
as I said, the Muslims themselves are also liberalizing, so I don't think that this turns the tide.
So how do you? I mean, there's been more than a few rabbis who have spoken out against the anti-Semitism in Germany and France.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the anti-Semitism is not coming from white French people; it's coming from these Muslims in France
Yeah, I don't think
living.
that it's good for Jews for Europe to import a lot of Muslim refugees. I don't think that that's a very controversial viewpoint. Well, maybe it is, but it
The
shouldn't be.
liberal. That's the liberal modus operandi.
Yeah, correct.
So, I mean, you cannot say that liberalism is actually making the world more liberal. It's kind of this kind of
Yeah, it is. Like
no, it's
in two
no.
ways, it's both the case that the Muslims are getting more liberal on their own, and that the Muslims who come to Europe are going to be vastly more liberal than those who stay
I,
home. Both of
all
those
right.
things are going to happen. So that's a liberalizing world.
I don't see any evidence for that, and I would love to see you present evidence for that. But I have to
Well, just
just
look at
grab.
attitudes towards
I
women,
just
right?
I
Go
gotta
ahead.
grab a glass of water real quick, so I'll
Okay,
step
no
out.
problem.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. All right. So, Cern, anything you want to comment on so far, or take the discussion in a different direction?
Mm, nothing particularly that you guys have talked about. I'm curious what your thoughts are now on the near term economic prospects um, for, in terms of like recession probability over the next year.
They haven't changed that much. Maybe slightly higher in terms of that, because there was that crossover, right, which usually presages recession, where you had the long term rates fall under the short term rates. But overall, I still don't think it's more likely than not that we're going to see a recession in the next year.
Yeah, I guess I am pretty confident that we're likely to see a recession in. I guess by the end of 2020, I would say. I think aside from the yield curve inversion, the overall sentiment from people who pay attention to the economy seems to have been getting negative, even though fundamentals in terms of job growth and in economic growth
Right.
are pretty decent.
So by temperament,
I think
I'm more inclined to emphasize the fundamentals than the sentiment. Go ahead.
right. Whereas I think the temperament is basically an early indicator of where the fundamentals are going to start heading.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We will certainly see. For those who don't know, me and CERN have a bet going, a huge, enormous bet that's going to shake the markets over whether there's going to be a recession in the next year. I think no, but it will be very interesting. More broadly speaking, how do you see the prospects for the American economy with all the sort of changes you've seen? Not huge changes, but in terms of like more protectionism, um, a little bit harder to import immigrants. Do you see a major change in the fundamentals there?
I I don't really. I think it will take a lot more protectionism to bring manufacturing back, and I I think changes to immigration uh, are really um, cumulative. I guess so. A few years of reduced immigration won't have much of an effect on the price of labor, and honestly, I think we're at a point where it takes a pretty drastic um, improvement, yeah, a pretty drastic rate of tariffs to make up for the fact that companies have mobility just as labor does, and so if the labor doesn't come here, they're able to go where the labor is.
Right. Yeah. I think I broadly agree. Um, I think that, but yeah, Did you watch by any chance the Starship presentation?
I've seen snippets of it. It's pretty exciting.
I think it's pretty cool, right? Like they've apparently people actually came to this configuration in Kerbal Space Program trying to figure out how to fly the thing, and they found it was a lot easier with just those two fins, kind of skydiving. It's exciting to see that kind of innovation in aerospace.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been wanting to see something like this for a long while now. So I'm glad it's getting done.
Do you think that how optimistic do you think that the timeline is on on this Starship? Like, do you think it's going to be it's going to fly in the next 6 months, etc.?
Nope. um, yeah, I think it's just a very optimistic timeline, but I really don't care if it's delayed for a while. I'm just glad they're working on it.
Yeah. Um, there was some. I think someone said that Elon Musk was one of the real bright spots in terms of technical innovation, and the world looked kind of depressing when you saw the continual degradation of these capabilities. But do you think that Starship will meet its promise? What likelihood do you assign to Starship actually doing eventually exactly what it says on the tin, which would be quite revolutionary? I don't know. One thing that stood out to me about Elon's presentation was how it's going to represent a multiplication, like thousands of times of our throw capability to orbit, which is just a really drastic change. It changes the cost equation completely.
Yeah, so I think so I'd say that the technology has always been fundamentally feasible, um, and that's why I've wanted to see it get done for a long while. So I think assuming that financing isn't an issue, I think it's going to happen.
It seems to me that financing isn't going to be an issue because at this point you have such a supply of capital looking for investments, and you have this sort of really good story behind SpaceX. So it seems like it should take a long time for them to actually get out of runway. I think that like their failure scenario involves them kind of punting for at least a decade without having much to show for it.
Yeah, I would. That makes sense. I would certainly hope that that's the case. I guess I feel like the smart money would be somewhat skeptical simply because monetization would be difficult. Um, I'm not
Because
sure
the
how
launch the
much.
launch market is so small.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, fundamentally, you need to be able to launch something that gets you the return, the economic return that justifies the cost of launching it. And I don't know that there's anything in the works that would actually be able to make economic use and generate private return
There's
for
the
launching
uh,
some such stuff.
there's the point-to-point transport idea, but there's also I think like Starlink. They're planned to have like a super internet, satellite internet, which is like better in terms of latency and bandwidth and everything, like by a wide margin.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I certainly hope something of the sort pans out, um, and I suspect there will be enough enough investors throwing money at crazy ideas that this will be able to get funding. I certainly think it would be a better bet for like SoftBank to invest in this than to be investing in things like Uber or WeWork. So yeah.
WeWork is going to take over the world, man. Don't you worry about that. They give their employees free alcohol. How could a company like that not succeed? But in terms of
Well, you need meat.
in terms of like technology, I was reading about stuff like about the pressurization problem. Like apparently, fighter jets are only partially pressurized to save on weight, and even commercial planes, obviously they decrease the altitude to like equivalent of like 5,000 feet in order to reduce strain on the airframe. In
That's
space,
on the new ones. Older ones are closer to like 10,000 feet.
hmm,
It's pretty annoying when you get off the flight and you have altitude sickness.
Right. Yeah. I think that yeah. I think that's a big part of what makes flying more comfortable is just that the newer ones have higher pressures, and we really don't like those low pressures. But there's the option of oxygen enrichment, which is what they do on fighter planes, and what they tried to do on some, or what they did on some capsules was like a pure oxygen environment in space to reduce the need for strength of the capsule itself. And I don't think that there's been any like super long term studies, but I think that you don't get there's no there doesn't seem to have been any ill effects from the Gemini capsules being there with just oxygen at the correct partial pressure. But I don't know if you've seen it, but Jeff Bezos has his own vision for space, and that involves great big cylinders filled with gas, and you just live on the surface of the cylinder. And you'd save a lot if you just move to a pure oxygen atmosphere at whatever percentage, like a fifth of an atmosphere. Do you think that that's the future? Humans living in no nitrogen environments. It also dovetails with Greg Cochran's thing where he says nitrogen narcosis is making us dumber. So if you live in a pure oxygen environment, that's one way around it.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is we haven't really seen any adverse health effects from pure oxygen. Um, so I think if you're going to be in space, that is very likely the way to go.
We don't do it
Although
now,
obviously,
on the
yeah,
shuttle and on
it's
earlier capsules, and the Soviets never did it. But
right, and it's probably something that you want to you want to continue testing the effects off and before you go ahead and do it for thousands of people.
right.
But yeah, I mean, I think the space capsules thing is interesting because it's not clear to me what that actually buys you aside from slightly better, I guess
You mean the
solar
cylinder
power.
idea?
Yeah, I guess what's the point is my question.
Well, I guess it maximizes living space per material, just to have that there's a cylinder, and then you rotate it, and then like the material is used to support the living space. Um,
Well, sorry. I guess my question isn't what's the point of your space of your space living arrangement being in a cylinder, but I guess
oh, what's the
what's
point
the
of it in the
point of
first
putting
place?
people in space? Yeah.
Um, that's a good question. In the long run, I think it's the future because you can just multiply the carrying capacity of the solar system. I don't know how many times, billions, quadrillions of times, just by turning things into capsules and then floating those capsules around the sun, right? Because
Right. Right. Right.
it,
You basically get past the limits of the limited surface areas of the planets and
exactly.
yeah, grow
in the
further.
short run, we don't have a surface area problem, right? We're
Yeah,
not lacking
exactly.
surface
We're
area.
we're really far from running out of living space.
Right. So in terms of the short run, why would you have a habitat? Well, there's the obvious thing of research, but I think also like as a staging area, if you had like a lot of space to work, it could be a way to enable on orbit assembly. It could be a tourist thing if your windows are good enough. I don't know if you've seen those high quality videos of the space station, but that cupola is amazing. I think that if you could have like roomy quarters and gravity and a view like that, it would actually be kind of desirable to a lot of people, like very desirable to a lot of people. And so there's a tourism angle there. Um, in terms of military, I think that there's some applications to having just more capacity online there, and more independent action being taken from space. What else? That's about it, I guess. I think the case for I think that the in space habitats are a lot less interesting than colonization of other planets at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel the same way. I think colonization, uh, both establishing bases on the moon and colonizing Mars are both very interesting, and as well, just mining the asteroids for expensive heavy metals is also an interesting way bring economic value back to Earth.
Right. Fletcher asks, why would we want to multiply our carrying capacity? Well, it's kind of a question like, what's the value of life? If you could imagine a world where Earth could support only a billionth of the people it currently supports, I think that that's a worse world than the world we have now. And so I think that a solar system that can support many, many, many times more people is a better solar system, because I like people. That's sort of an axiom, I guess. And when you dispense with that axiom, I think you get to like a place where it's difficult to say what to do in general for the future.
What do you mean you like people?
I think people are good. I think it's good to have people alive and flourishing and having children and dreaming and all that sort of stuff that humans do. I think it's good.
I mean, are all people the same? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Well, okay. So to clarify, I mean, are some people, some groups of people better than others? I mean, do you want the world just inhabited full of Africans? Because that's kind of the way that we're going.
I'd like all the races of humanity to survive. I think that it's absurd, for instance, to be for ecological preservation of various species, but then have no concern for the survival of say, Africans. I think that's kind of madness and a moral blindness that's absurd.
Okay, let's say that tomorrow there were no Africans. What would we lose?
We'd lose a lot. I mean, I think that Africans bring their own perspective to the world. I think that they're a really valuable perspective and a valuable group of people who contribute enormously to the arts and even to all the varied walks of life that the world has. I think that there's not an area where you can say that Africans are completely without merit.
We'd also lose the largest source of genetic variety for humanity.
Where would we be without the BBC? I mean, this is kind of this weird liberal naivete that like I said, if I was an Israeli citizen, I would have a huge, well, I do have a huge problem with you guys, but I would have even more of a problem with you guys because you guys are on the same side as George Soros. And if I had to choose,
what's happening is that you're compressing all the political spectrum into a very narrow range, which you sit outside of. But I think that you'll find that my political desires and George Soros's look light years apart from a conventional political perspective, which I think looks.
No,
at
you are exactly advocating George Soros's.
How am I advocating for George Soros's political views?
Well, we need to have more Africans. What's the problem with having Africans in Israel? Like,
where have I said that I'm for African immigration into Israel or into America or into Europe?
So
I'm advocating for their survival, and I'm saying that they bring value.
Are you advocating for the deportation of Africans from Israel?
No. Oh, well, okay, if they're illegal, then yes. But and I'm not advocating the deportation of any African Israeli citizens, or sub-Saharan African Israeli citizens. I don't believe that it's a good idea to base your deportation decisions on someone's racial background.
Yeah, it's a very naive way to look at the world, to be honest.
No, I mean, it isn't.
Well, here, let me put it from my own personal European context, where the Spanish colonized Mexico, right? And so you have these mestizos and the castizos, right? And then you also have the more native Mexicans, which I don't know what they call them, but off the top of my head, but I think that the Spanish did a bad thing, or did a horrible thing by by taking Mexican, I don't know, war wives, if you want to call them that.
Well, they didn't exactly have a huge amount of European wives to choose from. I think it was a good decision to mate with the natives and continue their line.
No, absolutely wrong. I mean, you compare what the Spanish did versus what the British did in North America, right? Or I mean, in the continental, the southern 48.
The North Americans brought a lot more women, or the
Yeah,
English brought a lot
yeah,
more women
maybe,
along with them.
maybe if the Spanish brought more women, we wouldn't have Mexico today.
Maybe, but I
Well,
don't object. Go ahead.
the GDP per capita difference between Mexico and Spain is actually not that big.
What?
Right. I don't see
Wait,
Latin
sorry,
America.
say
I don't
that
see Latin
again? I didn't
America.
hear that.
Go ahead. Okay.
I didn't hear
Go
that.
ahead.
Say it again. Say it again. I didn't hear it.
The GDP per capita of Mexico is quite decent compared to the GDP per capita of Spain. I think you can't really compare Mexico to the U.S. without taking into account that Spain is not as successful as England.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know it's a very Jewish thing to say that, the GDP is how we measure how good a people are, but no, that's not the way it works. And not only
But
that, but
perhaps
there's
the difference
more.
between us, Ovi, is that we're not talking about like how good a people are in terms of creating a racial hierarchy. We're talking about
I'm sorry,
results.
the world can live without tacos, okay? I'm sorry. Like tacos are not that important. Burritos are not that important.
The world could live without Europeans. That doesn't mean that it's a good thing for the world to be without Europeans.
Yeah. And name me one way that Mexicans are better than Europeans.
Well, it's a complicated question, but one
No, it's
difference.
not.
Yeah, it is.
Name me one thing that the Mexicans do better than
Well, for
Europeans.
instance, Hispanics have a longer life expectancy. They're healthier longer, probably due to adaptations to the American.
Citation needed, because Mexicans are actually the fattest race on Earth.
Yeah, yeah, and guess what? Mexicans, who, as you say, are a lot fatter than Europeans
So we
in the
shall
same
be
place,
fat.
they live longer. Isn't that
If
amazing?
only we were all fat like the Mexicans, we would
Isn't
be
it
better
great?
off.
Isn't it great for you to learn about the value of biodiversity? They live longer. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I'm still skeptical. Yeah, I want to see
Just look up the
this.
life expectancy
I want to see
statistics
a
for
citation.
Hispanics.
I want to see a citation.
Look up the life expectancy statistics for Hispanics in America, and look up, for example, Cuban
Oh,
life expectancies.
wait a second. Wait a second. No. Wait. You gave yourself away there. I'm talking about Mexicans. I'm not talking about Hispanics in America. I'm talking
Well,
about
are you talking
Mexicans.
about racial differences, or what are you talking about?
Yes, I am talking about racial
Right.
differences. Yeah.
So Amerindians, right, have certain adaptations to the American situation, which include less autoimmune diseases, stuff like that, and that is likely related to the higher Hispanic life expectancy.
No, you're
Why
still
not?
you're still conflagrating two different issues. We're talking about Mexicans in Mexico, not
I'm
Hispanics
talking
in
about
America.
Amerindians in terms of which is the racial category that you're talking about. If you're not talking about race, I don't know what you're talking about because you seem to be interested in race as opposed to nationality when you're talking about this specific question.
Yeah, already there's people in chat. Dio Strago saying those life expectancy stats are fake. That within that group, it's the European Hispanics that live longer than native Hispanics.
Yeah, whatever. It's still interesting to see the anomalously high life expectancies among Hispanics, and I think that you can point to the differences, and you can also point to
No,
other things.
but you're still not understanding the point. There's a difference between Hispanics with European admixture, or
Okay.
Hispanics living in America
Regardless, it represents
versus
a source
fucking
of value in your
native
terms.
Mexicans.
It represents a source of value in any value system. It's important to be able to live longer, live healthier, and the fact that you see evidence in this direction means that there's something to contribute right there, and it's significant. Moreover, there's also differences in psychology, which are in many cases advantageous. I believe that there's lesser rates of depression, for instance, among Hispanics than among Europeans. So I just reject absolutely your notion that we have nothing to take
Ignorance
from
is
the other
bliss.
races of humanity.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss.
You're the one
So
who's ignorant.
as long as people are happy, that's all that matters.
No, it's
It
not all that
doesn't matter.
matters.
It doesn't matter if we live in a
I
third
didn't say
world
that
economy.
it's all that
It
matters.
doesn't matter. It doesn't
I said
matter if we live on
it's
dirt
something to
floors.
contribute. You're
No, yeah.
relying
Well,
on a
I mean,
perspective that these people have nothing to contribute. I'm saying, evidently, they do.
what do they have to contribute other than tacos and burritos? What do they have to
As I've
contribute?
said, those two things are very significant on their own, and that's by no means the only thing that they contribute. They also contribute, obviously, economically, which you reject in significance, but which I reject your rejection. I think that their contributions are important. That their work, their
Work.
yeah, the work they contribute, the labor that they provide, and the goods that they provide with their labor, with their diligence, that is important. I reject the notion that that's not important. I think so. Overall, I think that you're coming from a perspective that relies on an unrealistic perspective that the races of humanity don't have anything to offer, and that we'd be better off without them. I think that's actually.
Do you
I think
think?
it's only driven by a desire to reject the values of your society. It's not driven by logic. It's not driven by evidence.
The yeah, the values of my society. Well, that's another conversation to have. But so, are you saying that America would be a better place if it was majority Mexican rather than majority white?
No.
That's a straw man.
Well, I mean, surely if these people are such, great workers, they're so, beneficial to society, then, I mean, why wouldn't they be better than white people?
Because there are virtues to every group of people, and in the case of America, I think America should remain for the population that's here.
What virtues do Mexicans provide that white people don't?
I just gave you a bunch, and I'm not going to repeat myself.
White people aren't hard workers?
No, I'm saying that. I'm saying that. Thank God he's here. What I'm saying is that they indeed do provide things that would not be found elsewhere, and that is valuable.
Like what? What can you find in Mexicans? What can you find in the Mexican race that you can't find
in addition to those things? In addition to those things, they provide things that everyone else provides. They are people.
Are you saying that white people
they are
aren't
people.
Hard workers?
They are people. They work.
Oh yeah. Everyone are people.
They provide intellectual labor. They provide physical labor. They work to save your life if you go to the hospital and there's a Hispanic worker there. They work to save your life, Ovi.
The problem is that white people don't work for fucking pennies like Mexicans do.
The point that's irrelevant. I'm not denigrating white people. And you continually reframe me refusing to denigrate other races as me denigrating white people. It's just it's just absolutely a misrepresentation of what I'm saying.
But you do denigrate white people when you say that, the Mexicans are such hard workers. Where would we be with the hard
How is that a denigration of white people?
I mean, it's implying that white people aren't hardworking.
No, it's not.
Yeah. You're saying that America would not be as hardworking if it wasn't for these...
I never said that.
These hardcore Mexicans.
I never said that.
Well, it sure sounded like it.
Yeah, it sounded like it to you because of your perspective, but I think I've already given my views on what your perspective is.
Yeah, I can give my perspective on what your views are as well.
Yep, I think we know where the other person stands. Maybe the conversation should move in a new direction. David, my distant cousin. How's it going, brother?
Praise the Lord.
Hey, David, how's it going? Good to see you. I have David on my channel now.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I guess Bab sent me the link. I thought it was going to be his channel, but it's yours. So,
yeah.
Welcome. Thanks for hosting the stream. I don't know, just random banter, the normal OV.
Yeah. You know what? Did Babs tell you anything?
No, I just checked my Gmail and I saw that Babs sent me a link.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you did. Oh, hey, Babs is in the chat. Hey, Babs, where are you? Babs promised to be here, by the way, and he's ducked out on me. But at least he's sent a number of people my way.
He'll be here. He's got shit to do. He'll be here.
Yeah, I'm not going to be here for that much longer though. It's coming on some late times over here, but I'm going to try to keep it going as long as I can. So, David, anything new? How was your week in review with Church of Entropy? Did that go well?
We did the year in review.
Oh.
And it was
starting at the end of the year.
Yeah, we've done 27 streams, almost every week since April, and besides reviewing like the rise and fall of minor e-celebs and viewership and who we're talking to, who are more successful dealing with and more and less successful. Also, various ideas and progression. In terms of our main overlap of interest is the hard problem of consciousness, quantum mind, and science. Although also various issues that have returned many times. So we talked quite a bit about free will because for a few months there was these debates on free will. We talked about God impersonal versus personal, and we actually talked for like an hour about group evolutionary strategy, and Claire was on. She got kind of triggered, whether it's ideological determinism versus genetic determinism, and if it's genetic determinism, whether it's individual determinism versus group determinism. So you're just trying to figure, have we actually progressed in understanding these ideas from months and months of debate? We didn't talk too much about the JQ. We've been thinking like OV. Okay, we've debated tens of hours about the JQ, and I focus usually more on banking and historic. More. I take the positive that Jews in general, meaning all Jews, not just like religious Jews, where Luke might kind of divide and say they're like they're good Jews and bad Jews. They're saying like generally all Jews are good for society, and historically, so we'll argue World War II, German, Rome, Greece, and so they're fun arguments, like thinking about OV on Claire's stream. We talked to like the Punic, did the Jews take the side of Carthage in the First Punic War? And does it
Oh
make
God,
sense? Well, we were
that's
looking
going
into
back
it.
pretty far.
Yeah, but
Oh, hell
saying
yeah.
the J2. So I'm saying that Europe and Jews rose together, that all major European civilizations basically had an alliance with the Jews, and kind of debt. Like your theory of elites was that anti-Semitism is natural because Jews have always filled this middleman banking management position in basically all societies. And we talked about, Alexander the Great, did he ally with the Jews, Caesar, and, through the progression of Europe,
Yeah,
with the concept that, kind of like most people are born slaves, most people are born into debt. And
but I think that the situation with Ashkenazim in Europe is different from the situation of Jews earlier on. I don't think that you had this money lending niche indefinitely in Jewish history. But I'd like to get Jen in here. Good to see you. Glad you could come on.
Hi, Kyle. Thanks for having me on. Babs sent me the link, so I thought I'd pop in and say nice to see you streaming, and I'm glad you're keeping it up. Hi, Duvit and OV and CERN. Nice to see you too.
Awesome.
Seagull, Jen, Seagull, how does it feel? I mean, are you you're not too depressed after you lost that debate against me, are you?
well, it looks like she won in the end. Like, I mean, at the end, she ended up beating you 2-1. Like, you only won temporarily at the beginning of the vote count, but as the votes kept on coming in, she destroyed you.
What are you talking about? Do you have a link for this?
Yeah, check the Streamlabs now. Like last time I checked it, she had over 100 votes.
You mean, check the.
Would you look
the-
at that?
the
Blown
straw
out.
poll?
Blown out by Jen. Nothing to be ashamed of, Obi.
Well, he got off to an early lead. Like he had like 40, 50 votes within the first hour. And
Oh please! Oh please!
I don't have.
No, it's fine. I mean, OV won, but I guess I wouldn't call that a debate per se. But you did win the.
There we go. All right, fair enough. Fair enough.
I don't have a wrench.
Would you call it a debate? Because it was more of
Yeah,
like
it
a.
was a debate.
Okay,
It
yeah,
was-
let me put it in. I put it in the chat, but currently right now she has 101 votes, OV has 55, and Gandalf has 27.
There we
Where-
go.
where'd you-
But in terms of the hard problem of consciousness, I just like to ask: do you guys follow Sam Harris at all? Are you interested in Sam Harris? He seems to be obsessed with this
Sam
question.
I
Harris,
watch his podcast regularly, like in 2-speed. I
Cool.
watch almost everything that if I don't participate in it, I watch in 2-speed.
Good
But
practice.
I watch Sam Harris basically every week, unless he's got
Nice.
like a really uninteresting guest.
God forbid. I think that Jordan Peterson is more convincing than Sam Harris, to be honest. God forbid.
I like them both. I find them both congenial. I'm not going to worship either of them, but I think that they both add to the discussion.
I'm pretty, versatile. I have a wide variety of sources. So I watch, channels that they have a channel like Science and Non-Duality, the London Royal Society. Um, so I follow quite a few channels that deal just with this topic in conferences that post videos. Besides, like popular streamers like Sam Harris.
Nice.
If it wasn't for that nose, Duvid would be pretty maneuverable. It's just that nose is, it affects his aerodynamics.
Wouldn't it improve aerodynamics ultimately? I don't know if you recall.
No,
there was
no,
there was an addition. There was an addition, Ovi, of a rod. You might call it an aerodynamic nose to the Trident missile, in order to improve its aerodynamics, because the very kind of rounded spherical shape was made into a longer body by the addition of this pendulous appendage. So I think that actually you improve aerodynamics with such an addition.
Well, the ADL
Sounds like
added.
you guys might need a physicist to settle this.
Yeah, with the OK meme added to the ADL hate list, the Happy Merchant meme was actually added together to the hate list symbol list at the same time as the OK gesture.
Wow.
I was pretty surprised when somebody actually got fired for making an OK sign.
Yeah.
Oh, did you guys hear there was a new article that came out? Something about how the do you guys remember there was a judge, an American judge, that said that his children or his grandchildren or something like that would only get their inheritance if they married another person of
If
their
they
own
married
race.
a white Christian, if they married a Jew,
Yep.
he apparently pressured his daughter to break off an engagement or a relationship with a Jew, and that resulted in the overturning of a conviction of a Jewish man who was part of some sort of group which was involved in a murder, and so all of them get convicted under the Texas law.
Yeah, the something 7. Yeah, so it hasn't been overturned, but it's going to the Supreme Court now.
I misread. It was, as you say, it's just being challenged right now.
Right. Yeah. So they're saying that this judge is anti-Semitic because allegedly he said during the trial that you fucking Jew, you fucking K word, and this kind of thing.
Right, and because he seriously pressured his daughter not to marry a Jew or to break off a relationship with a Jew because of his Jewish, because he was Jewish.
I'm not familiar with that specific aspect, but
yeah, that was what caught my eye more than all the rest of the stuff. Was just that apparently it was serious enough to result in him ending a relationship that his daughter had.
Well, I think the major thing was not that he brought any specific. I mean, the original aspect was not the specific threats, if you want to call it that, quote unquote. But that he said, if you want your trust fund, you have to marry someone of your own race. He didn't specify that you had to be
Babs
Jewish.
is here. Babs is here.
Hey, Seagal, Babs.
I'm dealing with.
Oh, you need to up your mic, Babs. Also, Ovi, I hate to be a buzzkill, but please don't say that on my channel. I do have to warn you.
Don't say that.
Yeah,
Hold on one minute.
Don't look for Kyle.
You can just say hail if you want.
Okay, all right. My friend Kyle, he's about this tall. If you've seen him, tell me if you've seen him. He's about this tall.
Right.
So I wanted to ask a question.
Daddy,
you're very faint, Babs, but I can hear you.
Duvid and Kyle.
Oh, that's better. Speak.
Yeah, to Duvid and Kyle, I'm curious. I have to dash out in a second. I may be able to come back later, but the Kylesian brand. Do you think that the Kylesian brand has staying power? And do you think that where do you see the Kylesian brand going in the future? Do you think that the Kylesian brand is inextricably linked to the Luke Ford show, or do you think that the Kylesian brand has potential for branching off? Every time I see you streaming, it seems like you have more people watching. Duvid, Kyle, what do you think about that?
I hope
Do you think
so,
your
but
predictions will
we
be
had
true, Duvid?
I don't know if you caught it, Babs, but we had like a very long conversation on this topic, probably like 30 minutes long, at I think on your stream. So unless there's something new to add, maybe Duvid, you could speak to it briefly, but I don't want to talk about it for too long. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, anyone could build a brand. I mean, Kyle's intelligent young man seems to have streaming down. I'm sure he could build a brand. Whether he could become successful in terms of having guests or your audience, that that you become bigger than Luke Ford, or branch out where you start having a majority your own audience, as opposed to taking audience from people that watch Luke Ford or subscribe to Luke Ford and are also subscribed to you. Um, that might take you a few years, because I mean you've been on Luke Ford hundreds of times, and Luke Ford has tens of thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of people that watch him. So presumably for even a year or two, the majority of people that watch you are probably going to be from the Lugosphere. So it would take you a pretty long time, probably over a year, unless you had someone, not even like JF or people within the Lugosphere. It'd have to be like someone completely different that platformed you,
Yeah.
and
This is
that
always about networking. So you don't build an audience without networking with larger creators. So yeah, that would be what it would depend on for sure.
if
Yeah,
you
I mean
could get on
that's
like a channel that has like 100,000 views, that's largely unconnected to Luke Ford, maybe you could break out of the Luke Ford stream sphere right away. But just based on like networking within like the people you meet here, Babs, Week in Review, Halsey, um, it might take you a year or two till the majority of your audience is non-Lucosphere people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
You could even have
I
100
definitely
viewers.
agree with that with that assessment. Yeah.
It's hard to get. I mean, 100 viewers is quite an accomplishment. But I'm saying, like, even
Yeah.
if you had 100 live viewers, and took you a year or two to build up 100 live viewers, um, it's likely that 50 of those viewers are going to be people that migrated from the Lucosphere to you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I agree with that totally. So, any other questions, Babs? Any other dirt you want to stir up?
If Bab, before he runs away, like I had a Jewish thing that was pretty interesting. If any of you ever listened to Shaul Magid,
wait. This is an entirely Jewish stream right now.
yeah, I mean this is something. I
Wait,
mean,
wait, 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 wait. CERN is
Hold
not Jewish,
on.
and I believe you're not,
Yeah.
and I believe
I mean,
Claire. I mean, sorry, Jen isn't either.
No,
this
Jen's
is a
totally Jewish.
conceptual framing that seemed pretty interesting.
I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish. What are you talking about?
Magid. If you've heard of Shaul Magid, he's like a pretty prominent Judaic studies professor. He used to be at Dartmouth. Now I think he's like Indiana. He's written quite a few books. You could find him on like YouTube and Judaic studies programs, lectures. Um, and I assume you've heard the joke, the Jewish joke, where like the guy is trapped on a desert island, and after like 10 years, he finally gets rescued, and he's showing people around, and he's saying like, here's the two shuls, and he's like, why two shuls? And he's like, this is the shul I daven in, and this is the shul that I don't daven in. Which I mean, you've heard that joke. But
I have not, but yeah, there you go.
You've heard
Now I have.
Like they say, like Israeli Jews, the Orthodox shul is the shul that they don't daven in. Like Israeli secular Jews don't go to shul, but the shul they don't go to is an Orthodox shul. So Shaul Magid used that framing and said Israel has become the shul that American Jews don't go to, and it just so is that conceptual framing that like most Jews have a shul they don't go to, and that informs their Judaism. So Israeli Jews don't go to the Orthodox shul, but if they went to shul, it would be the Orthodox shul. And American secular Jews, the shul they don't go to has become Israel, and that kind of informs American Jewish politics now, where the religion itself has been taken over by, instead of having like the Reform shul or conservative shul that they don't go to, now that their shul that they don't go to has become Israel.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I thought that was interesting. I mean, you
Sure.
could look up if Shaul Magid's a pretty prominent. That he was at Dartmouth and he's a big scholar, written a lot of books on Jewish studies, and that's how he was framing it. I thought that was kind of interesting, and maybe you or Babs or even Ov might appreciate that framing.
Ov says in the stream, I thought it was Calician. I'm the Khaleesi, says
And actually,
Babylonian B.
when people accuse you of being a dual citizen, Kyle, and you said you're not Israeli,
No.
I saw like Sholem Ravashkin came and spoke in Detroit, and I live streamed it on my channel, and he was actually held in prison for 80 days on the dual citizenship aspect. Where I mean, he was not an Israeli citizen; he was born in Brooklyn, and when he was considered a flight risk for being a dual citizen. He's like he only has
Yeah.
one citizenship, U.S. citizenship, but because the right to return and he could have automatic U.S. citizenship, they
Yeah.
held him in prison for 80 days, and then eventually they had a whole bunch of Jewish organizations that finally got him released.
Right.
So that concept of dual citizenship actually has precedence in the U.S. courts just because of the right of return.
Right. So that's related to his status as a flight risk, which is not purely because he has a place to go, but also just because of other things that make him a flight risk. So, yeah, I
In
mean,
this case,
courts have a lot of leeway in these terms.
The right of return. I'm saying it was actually
Yeah.
legislated in court and appealed.
Right. So yeah, I mean, courts have a lot of leeway in these regards, and you don't have a right to necessarily to be let out. I mean, it's a determination that the court makes if you're a flight risk, and it does seem like that is a factor in determining whether you're going to run if you have somewhere to run. So I obviously have somewhere to run, and that's fine. I don't see it as being a negative thing, but obviously people are free to disagree.
I didn't realize. I think I had read that before and heard that before. But when people say like the dual citizenship, and say like, well, actually, they could say yes, all Jews in America are essentially dual citizens. Even if you're like, what do you mean? I'm not a dual citizen. Like I've never applied to move to Israel. But you could say, well, you could, therefore you're a dual citizen.
Yeah, in certain terms, maybe. I think that I don't think that it's actually true that it's equivalent in terms of law, but obviously there is that factor in certain specific cases. So yeah, but I don't think that
risk is
I don't think that much hinges on that ruling, right? I don't think that people's perspective on Jews in America will change based on that ruling, or that the status of Jews in America will change based on that ruling.
Office, you can't serve in the U.S. government as a Jew because like you're a dual citizen. And you're
well,
like,
that's not true. Dual citizens can serve in the U.S. government.
But people say they want to make a rule that dual citizens can't serve in office, and that would mean that potentially
the Jews could not serve in office. Yeah. But I presume that you could do something like renunciation, right? That applies to other situations. So you could probably theoretically renounce, and Israel would probably facilitate that in a case where Jews abroad were being threatened because of their right of return. But that's a very distant possibility in American politics. And frankly, if there is such a situation where that is a politically viable thing to happen, I think that we have rather bigger problems than our right to serve in the government.
Yeah, I just know that's a accusation that's leveled at you constantly, and it was interesting. Sholem Ravashkin, what did speak about that when he was here in Detroit.
Right. I'm kind of curious, Kyle. What are the bigger problems that you see?
One
in respect
second.
to what you just.
Yep. Just quickly shut this. Oh. Yeah. I'd like to ask. Sorry, I hate to be a stickler about it, but I do ask that you turn your video off for the purposes of the stream, just because the flag in the background is an issue for me. I don't want to be a stickler, but.
I mean, what's wrong with the flag?
I think that that sort of symbology is not welcome on my stream, and also not necessarily welcome on YouTube. And so for those two reasons, I don't want that flag on my stream.
All right, fair enough. So Kyle, you know that I'm part Ashkenazi, right?
That doesn't surprise me. I think that you actually see a lot of involvement with Jews among anti-Semites, either ancestry or being married. I think is very common. So
OV is a feces covered rat in the chat.
Wait, say, you have to say that. Babs is coming in for the ambush, but I didn't hear what Babs said. Unfortunately, it was a little bit quiet.
he was referencing the feces-covered rat thing that I said earlier about
Oh.
people with politics that I don't like, particularly far-right politics, racialist politics in the conservative movement. And one should understand that statement comes in a certain context. It was in the context of me fighting essentially a war over that space with people who were directly personally attacking me and attacking my race. And so at that point, I feel completely justified in responding as vociferously as possible. That being said, as is evident, I'm always for dialogue as long as that dialogue is open and honest. And as long as it doesn't overstep certain bounds that violate either my sensibilities, my morality, or the terms of our host.
Babs, you're back. Did you want to?
No, I was just saying OV is a typical chat box feces covered rat. That's like, if I could think of one individual to perfectly sum it up, it would be OV.
Very kind of you, Babs. Babs always comes in to bring the blood sports level up as high as possible.
Oh, I have a lot of fun. People accuse me of being this hateful person. Oh, you think that Uncle A was this great man? Well, yeah, Uncle A was a great man, but thinking that Uncle A was a great person does not mean that I'm a. I mean, not all of the mainstream ideas about Uncle A are actually true. So,
well, that's beyond a doubt. But the issue is that the issue is the reasons for this emphasis. You can always place different emphasis on history, and so my objection to people with your political standpoint is that it stands in opposition to American values and to my heritage and to, I think, the heritage of every American who has ancestors who fought in the Second World War.
Yeah, my grandfather fought in the Second War as well.
Right.
The Second World War.
Yeah.
And he was on the American side as well.
Right.
Actually.
Right. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me.
What's the difference in American policy, where we basically make up and team up with our former enemies, all the time? Like basically every single war after World War II, we became allies, and like Kevin Michael Grace is always saying, like the surest path to getting U.S. citizenship is to lose a war to America. That why would the Nazis?
Yeah. My objection is not to Germans. Indeed, I have German ancestry. My objection is to Nazis. I object to that political movement. I object to the actions of those who acted under that banner. It's not a generalized objection where I hate Germans or I have any particular antipathy towards Germans in general. I think that the West, for instance, was very wise to try to make West Germany as powerful as possible as a counterbalance to the Soviets.
Well, I'm differentiating, like, obviously as a Jew, and even as a Jew, that you could say Israel might be taking a different policy if you take the hardcore view of what Israel's doing, like Ukraine and Hungary and allyship, but just saying that it's a general trend that after you defeat an army, that somehow you have to revive those people. So I'm not talking the German people, I'm talking actual Nazis, that you can't kill every one of them, and the movement still continues.
But if you renounce Nazi ideology, if you renounce the Nazi party and the actions of the Nazis, then I don't think that you're a Nazi anymore, presuming that was a genuine statement on your part, or that it was indistinguishable from genuine in terms of its consequences.
Yeah, but saying one thing, there were probably millions of Nazi supporters in America, and it's impossible to get full renunciation of the losing side.
Not only that, wait, David, you were talking earlier the other day about how there were Jews who were Nazi supporters as well.
Well, there were Jews who were Nazis. I'm saying we know that there were
absolutely.
There were at least 50,000, possibly more Jews who were card-carrying Nazis.
Yeah,
I mean,
it would be
on,
surprising if there weren't any. Yeah,
I mean,
especially if you're counting people with Jewish ancestry, by the maternal line as being fully Jewish, or just considering people with Jewish ancestry Jewish for whatever reason. You're going to have a lot of Nazis who are Jewish.
Yeah, you had a decent amount of 100% Jews that were Nazis, some that were Aryanized, some that hid the fact that they were Jewish, and then you had half Jews, quarter Jews, and then you had probably, you certainly had some Zionist collaborators. You probably had Jewish murderers, like we discussed this last time. That saying like there's millions of Jews, so
I don't find that surprising at all, frankly.
But the point I was making that there were tens of millions of Nazis, so obviously the movement's not going to disappear, and you can't.
But it is. It is going to disappear, in much the same way that the supporters of the Tsar eventually disappeared, or the supporters of the Kaiser eventually disappeared. It's that the support for political movements and for political entities is plastic
that's
to
not actually
political circumstances.
I mean, you talk about a supporters of a Tsar. Maybe like a specific Tsar that died and was deposed.
And of monarchy in Russia. Those supporters were pretty well stamped out. Eventually, there was a civil war, but eventually those forces were stamped out.
Was killed or disposed. So you're saying but even the Romanov family, you say there's not really people there that are going to say like Russia should be put in charge of the descendants of the Romanov family.
Right.
But Nazis are more an ideology, and they were a bigger movement.
Well, they're also rooted. I mean, I think that they'd be offended by the idea that they're not rooted in their rule of Germany, or that was not the seat of their power and the essence of their power. So I don't believe that. Like, for instance, I don't believe that people who sympathize with Nazis in America represent the continuation of that movement in a real sense. I think they represent sort of a desire to act out in a way that is unacceptable socially. I don't think.
What is your opinion, Kyle? Real quick. By the way, we got a couple. We got a couple new guests. But real quick before we get to them. By the way, Mike, my co-host, is here, and we got Daniel's here as well, and dude, we got the entire fucking crew here right now. Jesus Christ.
We do indeed.
Daniel.
The whole rat pack is here from
the whole rat pack,
from the feces processing filtration facility.
I'd like to ask Ov and Mike, how did your relationship start? Because that's very mysterious to me, at least looking from the outside. How has your relationship gone? How did it blossom? What's behind that story?
Well, that's a funny story, actually.
How much money did I give you, Mike, for you to be my co-host?
It was paid in the entertainment value. It was coming on your show.
It was paid in foreskins, is what it was paid in.
No, basically, I just followed people, off of the Luke Ford show. Somehow, I ended up on OV's channel, and that was back in the day when he had all the wig nats on and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like arguing in the chat, you could probably think about what it would be like to come across the filthiest room you've ever seen and trying to like argue in it, and they mostly just block you.
Right.
But OV's
I will say that Ov has proven fairly reasonable. Like, I think that I was expecting a more spicy personality, but I think that a lot of the spice just arose from the situation in that I had seen it like with people besides Ov. Ov himself seems to be pretty well mannered.
Yeah,
that's a fair point. Yeah.
He invited me on his show, like, all right, come on the show or we're gonna block you. So it was just weird going on his show, and I didn't want to be a bitch, right? I didn't want to bitch out, so I went on his show.
Yeah.
But he wasn't that mean at first. It was like,
did he get mean?
What
do you mean? Wasn't that mean at first? What do you mean by that?
They
Come on.
kind of had people on just to like fuck with them, and it was your whole crew, right? It was like
right, yeah. The crew kind of fucks things up, yeah, definitely.
what you guys would do, like bullying people.
That's how it always
I mean,
goes.
typical goy tactic. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's typical, right? You'll have people gang up unless there's a strong whip hand to break them up. Then you're gonna have people behave in some bad ways, right, Babs?
Exactly. Yeah. Do you prefer a cat and nine tails or like there's
a bullwhip, man?
Electric whips.
The bullwhip is the first supersonic object created by humans.
But we just had interesting conversations, you know.
Yeah.
So I just went back and it was like, well, we're not going to bridge our differences, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reiterate, I absolutely disagree with OV's views, but that's and my values are diametrically opposed to his, but we can talk, and as long as that talk is civil and above board, then I think that it's absolutely it's desirable to have a conversation that does not stray beyond the bounds of civility and the rules of the platform, and obviously the sensibilities of the host.
Did we find Kyle just now? Did we find him? He's about this tall. Did we find him?
You know, I think that you're about to get the what's it called, the rat whip.
Oh, am I? Things get too out of hand. Things get too out of hand. I'll just cut the stream off basically because it is getting late.
Oh.
Yeah. No question. Okay. No. I'm here and now I'm taking control. Okay.
Now we got a Rothschild here now.
Yeah.
So.
No. I'm not a. Okay. First of all, I'm not like just one married into my family. I'm not a director's son. Second of all, what do you call it? Literally. Oh man, I completely spaced on what I was saying. Shit.
Richard Rothschilds. You don't have to. He's richer than the Rothschilds. Leona Helmsley's cousin.
Look at Dubin coming in. Oh, those fucking Rothschilds.
They're not even that rich. What are you talking about?
I'm gonna give you here. I can give a tour of Babylonian Manor. Here. Is the camera picking up on this?
Aaron Amihud is in chat. Can we get Aaron on here as well?
Like, wait, let's let Babs talk. Let's let Babs talk. Babs, that's what you need to say.
Well, no, I'd be interested in Aaron potentially coming on here. It's based on what I was saying. It was interesting seeing you on the streams the last few times, Kyle. I liked what I saw. How long do you think, if you were like the ruler of a country and the chat box was the country, how long do you think it would take before a violent revolution occurred?
Well, I think pretty long. Like violent revolutions usually take place after the founders are buried, right? So the descendants get weaker and weaker with time. They go to seed, and then you have the revolution usually. I don't believe that the revolution usually starts out or usually happens with the people who actually started the whole thing.
That's not the way that it happened with the Third Reich.
Wait, but the that wasn't. I don't think that's analogous, right? Like the regime that the Third Reich overthrew was one imposed by foreign powers. So it wasn't like the regime the Third Reich overthrew was founded by people who had conquered or taken over Germany, like in the way that I'm talking about.
You're saying that the Treaty of Versailles wasn't you're saying that the Treaty of Versailles was entirely fair?
No, but you keep on conflating everything with fairness, right? So, I mean, rather, are you saying everything for you boils down to fairness? In point of fact, yes.
That's not what I'm saying.
It's just like Jonathan Haidt talks about when he talks about the moral axis and fairness, and you like your fairness, you like your little fairness, don't you?
Well, no, hold on.
To answer OV, I think that the Treaty of Versailles was more generous than what Germany would impose on the losers if Germany won.
Oh, wow. Okay, well,
absolutely.
But here's the thing. When I bring up the Treaty of Versailles, I'm not saying that it was fair or not fair or anything like that. But the point is that the Treaty of Versailles was still imposed by outside powers, whether they were France, or whether they were the Jewish subversives, or whether they were the Britain, which all one and the same. But the point of the matter is that
I'm glad
whether
that you're so much of a lionizer of Jewish power. It's quite gratifying to see all of these powers ascribed to the Jews.
I'm more than happy to admit that Jewish power exists. Yeah.
But I think that you have to recognize that Germany sought rather harsher things for its opponents than its opponents thought for Germany when they stood victorious over her.
The Treaty of however you say that word, Treaty of Brest-Litovsk.
Brest-Litovsk, something like that.
That was a pretty harsh treaty that they imposed on the Russians.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's funny. I just read this interesting article. There's a new book that came out about how the Russian citizens were actually, the idea that the Soviet citizens during Operation Barbarossa were all in favor of Stalin and all in favor of the Russian government.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Who says that? Who's ever said that, actually?
Well, okay, so
has there ever been anyone? Has literally anyone ever said that?
Daniel might say
that. But yeah, Daniel says that.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh
well,
shit!
He would be the
He's
one.
Come on now.
If anyone would do that, he would do that.
So yeah. I mean, yeah, this is kind of maybe a little bit more of an esoteric argument, but yeah, the idea that Germany would have been super harsh on the Russians.
Well, it was when it won the war with the Russians. It was harsh.
No,
Germany.
What are you talking about? World War I or World War II?
Yeah, and
World War One.
World War One, yeah. Well, but also during World War II, the terms that it sought were even more brutal, and it was able to enact that on much of Russia.
I'm coming at this
Soviet
from
territory.
Yeah, but here's the
Hold
problem.
on one second. Hold on.
Yeah.
Shove your feet covered rodent mouth. Okay. I just wanted to say. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to. Yeah, no. I just wanted to say, like, this is like an old school Babs cast. We have Duvid and Levi and Mike, and now Kyla's here. Yet another addition. And I just wanted to say, like the old school Babylonian Jew streams. Before we bring Levi in, who just showed up, I just wanted to, and I know Levi has some stuff to say. Levi's the #1 Kyle fan in these circles. He's a Kyle appreciator, Kyle Rowland respecter. Juvid, do you think that you could sing a Hebrew or Jewish song to open up this Jew stream?
Are you guys gonna fast on Yom Kippur? Kyle, do you fast on Yom Kippur?
I do not.
You're not. You don't do anything.
No, I was raised entirely secular by my Jewish mother. She was born to a liberal family, right? So there are secular Jews in Israel, and they're often not practicing. So that was the situation.
So was it an Orthodox synagogue that you didn't go to?
There was no. She's not really tied to any synagogue, right? Or so.
From the synagogue you didn't even have an Orthodox synagogue that you didn't go to?
Right, exactly. Yeah. There wasn't even a synagogue to not go to.
Like your brother, none of your first cousins?
No. Cousins? That's an interesting question, but probably not, just from what I've seen of them. Like, they're definitely not Orthodox.
You don't even know what, like, Usana Tokef is?
No.
Uchuva, Stucco, Tefillah, Mavirin, Gezerah, Roa. You have no idea the prayers or any of the...
No. We never did any prayers or bar mitzvah or anything.
Right.
There
That's
you
when
go.
you need a podcast to sing, like, preparation for Yom Kippur.
And that could be nice. It's not that I'm hostile to it. It's just it was never part of my upbringing at all.
Yeah, that woman of the New Right said she fasted on Tisha B'Av the first time in her life this year. Ayelet Sheked. So, fasted on Tisha B'Av for the first time in her life this year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, she's in like a coalition with some religious people, so it makes sense, doesn't it? Like, considering that her political fates were tied to the religious people in her coalition, it makes sense that she would start to find a little bit of religion, at least.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The suspicion would be the synagogue you don't go to is Orthodox, as opposed to, like, Babs is a member of a Reform. that you say like, would you align if you started looking into Judaism? Would you say,
Oh,
okay,
I
Orthodox is the right form of Judaism, I just don't want to do it? Or would you align and say like, I kind of like a reform,
no,
half?
no, no. I would never go halfway, right? I would never be like, oh, well, I wanna dip my toes in this. If I was deciding that this was a thing that I wanted to do, I would go the whole hog. I would be orthodox. I would not. I would not go
You'd
to a
change
reform synagogue.
and say that your ancestors were incorrect and modify the religion, and so like, so to say, reform it, take certain, like it still do some of the rituals and change the rest. So you look at it like the typical Israeli, that if you're going to do it, you should do it like the Orthodox.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I would say. I would not say that you should try to move into these liberal directions with your religion. If you believe in your religion, then believe in your religion.
But that puts you on the outs with the majority of American Jews. I'm saying that's a
Oh yeah, for
typical.
sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. If well, what's
And
the
say maybe
proportion?
you had
What's the
had
size of the Reformed Jewish community? I don't think it's very large compared to Orthodox or secular.
Well, I'm saying the Reform are kind of like better U.S. citizens, better Americans than the Orthodox, and like the new
I
Israeli.
disagree. I think that the Orthodox are
Reform are basically secular. I mean, in their beliefs.
yeah, and
I mean,
they're
they
left
believe in
wing.
God, but they're still liberal as shit.
Yeah, but the Reform will admit that our religion is messed up. So if you're arguing with someone who's like, look at all the stuff that your religion does, so the Reform would be like, yes, you're right. Our ancestors were kind of messed up, but they didn't know any better, and therefore we reformed ourselves.
Yeah, but
No. The problem with reform.
If I was going to do the religion, I would be just as messed up as my ancestors were and proud of it.
No, the problem with reform is that their political beliefs are essentially the same as secular Jews. That's the problem with reform Jews.
yeah, I mean, I'm
like
David. I'm politically more aligned with the Orthodox than with the Reformed Jews. So I would agree with in politics much more with Orthodox Jews than with Reformed Jews. And I don't see Orthodox Jews as being bad citizens.
Yeah, I mean, that's the irony of the coalition. That's the irony of the state you find yourself as someone with the beliefs that you have.
Kyle is an anti-Semite confirmed.
In America, I mean, saying the reform attitude, it makes sense to be a reform Jew in America, as where like your whole stance, like if you're Orthodox, you're like, okay, like we're in Gaulis, and you say you like long term, you don't plan to be in America, and your status as an Israeli in America, it's like, okay, like so you're just a draft dodger or like whatever.
Well, no, I mean, I think that you're
it's not fair to look at you as just a draft dodger.
I don't think so. Well, obviously there are a lot of possibilities, and if you were to see say Orthodox Jews constitute a large portion of America, or even just more generally, I think that the idea of them serving in the army is probably ultimately necessary, and I think that if they serve,
I'm saying that you're a draft dodger,
but I'm not.
Well, you are, because it's saying that there's no reason for you to be in America, and according to your theology and supporting Israel, in essence, you're just a draft dodger.
You're saying if I'm Orthodox?
No, as if you were Orthodox, then you wouldn't be a draft dodger, because you're not Orthodox. You're basically, whether legally you could be put in prison. You're saying you're not technically an Israeli citizen. If you were an Israeli citizen,
right? But none of this makes me a draft dodger.
Well, I'm calling you a draft dodger. Like, as a Jew, I'm calling you out and saying like, no, Kyle, you're just a draft dodger.
How am I a draft dodger?
For the sake of argument, you're saying like you're not a good Jew, you're not a good Israeli, like you're a draft dodger.
Well,
yeah, but you're talking about my
forbid.
relationship to Israel as opposed to America, right? So I mean, there are two conversations here about dodging responsibility in America or in Israel.
The whole reason you're here is because you're a draft dodger.
I'm not an Orthodox Jew, and sure, you view my responsibility as being to Israel, but I view my responsibility as being to America.
I have to say, I understand the argument that David is making, and in a general sense, David is correct. I mean, the Orthodox
was a draft dodger.
Huh? What?
You agree that Kyle's essentially a draft dodger.
Well, Kyle is not an Israeli citizen. So he can't dodge a draft that he's, from a country that he's not actually a citizen of.
Moreover, Israel does not consider it draft dodging for someone to live in America, even if they are an Israeli citizen. If you live abroad, that's a reason to be exempt from the draft, in fact.
David, you're making me defend Kyle. You're making me
from the Orthodox perspective, Kyle is a bad Jew because he's not Orthodox. From the Israeli perspective, Kyle is a bad Jew because he's a draft dodger.
But that's not the perspective that Israel puts forward to me at all.
Yeah,
well, it's not even the perspective that Israel puts forward to its own citizens who are abroad.
That's actually an issue.
You never had an Israeli call you a draft dodger. You never met an Israeli that called you a draft dodger.
No, not even remotely. Wait a second. They were actually very, very, very gratified to see me visiting, especially when the rockets were falling down. Exaggerated as that danger may have been, they were grateful to see people still coming to Israel as Israel was under attack. There was no notion that I was a draft dodger for not enlisting with the IDF, having grown up in America.
By saying if you don't enlist, you're basically a draft dodger. Saying if you're a
but only in your opinion. There's no one else who I've seen advance that opinion.
Here's the problem though, is that you can find.
I think a better term might be freeloader.
Well, maybe, but here's the problem. The problem is that you can find as many leftist Jews as you can find Orthodox Jews that are draft dodgers. I mean, I don't really see a difference between the Tel Aviv style Jews versus the ultra Orthodox Jews. I mean, they both dodge the draft. I mean, if you're trying to find a difference,
I don't think the Tel Aviv Jews actually do dodge the draft. I think that they do go to the army, but they do probably avoid strenuous service by certain measures, or at the very least, maybe are problematic in other regards. But that being said, I just don't see. I don't see that there's really an argument here, right? I think that this is all about how you characterize a situation that we all agree on.
Yeah, but saying your politics don't correspond with avoiding the draft. You're saying that if your politics are real,
not avoiding the draft in America, but avoiding the draft in Israel, as you call it, absolutely. I mean, I don't believe that I have a duty to run to Israel and sign up that counterbalances my duty to America, the country that I grew up in, the country that has raised me, and frankly, given Israel's attitude towards me, I don't see this as being something that's coming from Israel. Israel's attitude towards me is welcoming, and there's no notion of resentment from the fact that I'm a diaspora Jew from the Israelis that I've met, or from the Israeli government, which basically gives out free goodies to diaspora Jews to come visit. So the attitude of Israel is diametrically opposed to the attitude that you project towards the diaspora Jews.
And Kyle's on the front lines of battle right here, arguing it out every single night. That's more
the trenches, in the trenches, bro.
You got to enlist in saying there's certainly opinions that your mother committed a severe sin when she left Israel. That they're saying it's absolutely forbidden to leave Israel.
Yep, and probably by marrying who she married. Yeah, I mean there are people who consider that to be a grave sin, and that's life, right? If I was to become Orthodox, then I would have to concur with that opinion, or at least to some degree, I concur with that opinion. And that's one of the barriers you can see to me becoming Orthodox.
One is you become Orthodox, or two is you enlist. Other than that, you're basically a bad Jew.
Well, in your opinion.
Well, in the opinion
and that's fine. I don't need to be considered a good Jew by all Jews, David.
The only way to redeem yourself as a Jew is either to enlist or to repent.
Yeah, that's your opinion.
You can make up for it by.
I'm saying I'm surprised that you've never had that put to you like that.
Well, you shouldn't find it that surprising. Most people don't talk in these terms, right? Like particularly in secular circles, it would be very rare to find someone who's talking in these terms.
Well, no, because in Israel, secular people had to go through military service, and they would be, either jealous or hold a grudge against you that you skirted your duties that they had to fulfill. In the same way, you look at the Orthodox.
Someone
people,
who was born outside of Israel and who grew up entirely outside of Israel is shirking. That's not a typical view at all. I don't think that view is typical among any Israelis, frankly.
Well, Well, there is some respect in saying, even if it's someone like me or Babs, who whose parents weren't Israeli, that there is a resentment there to say, yes, you don't deserve the title Jew, and you say,
Okay,
okay,
but
if you're an
I
Orthodox
just
Jew,
haven't heard that sentiment from anyone else. That's all. So you're welcome to that sentiment, but I just don't get that anywhere else except from you,
well, that
and
might, I'm
that's part
saying,
of why your perspective is so valuable, David. You bring something to the table that no one else does.
I'm not even. I mean, my personal sentiment, I'm against mandatory military service.
Right, but
But
I'm saying that like the perspective that you're bringing to the table.
well, it's a right wing sentiment. So if you're espousing right wing beliefs, and a lot of people, right wing supporters of Israel in America, think that America should institute mandatory government service here in America too. So it's saying, like it just questions your position. Where is your footing as a Jew? As someone like, okay, you're not Orthodox and you didn't serve your country.
Oh yeah.
What
So
footing do you have as a
my
Jew?
status as a Jew just depends on the fact that everyone who cares about it considers me a Jew. So the people who Israel considers me a Jew. The religious authorities of Judaism consider me a Jew. The people who are anti-Semitic consider me a Jew. I consider myself a Jew. So in all those ways, I'm Jewish. If there was like some break in this wall of people who consider me Jewish, then I wouldn't call myself Jewish. But Jewish just seems to be the label that applies to me. It's
When
not
when you
like
look
a
in the
triumphant
mirror,
claim.
you don't
It's
see a
just
bad
a
Jew.
descriptor.
Like you don't look in the mirror and be like, "Shit, I'm a bad Jew."
No, I don't
Well,
consider
actually,
that's a
dude,
religious type of thinking.
Kyle, there's kind of a flaw in your argument. There are people who consider me Jewish in the white nationalist community.
Are you
but
maternally Jewish?
yes,
Okay, yeah. So you would even be considered Jewish by Jewish religious authorities.
He's not maternal. He's only 2% Jewish.
look at David coming in. David swooping in like a vulture.
No, but he didn't answer Kyle's question the way that you
I
meant.
did. My mother is Jewish.
You're saying your mother's mother.
How far back does it have to go, David?
If it's 3 generations without
Three
an Orthodox
generations?
Jew in your family,
Okay. So
you're not considered a Jew unless you're descended from a Holocaust survivor. So if you're only 2% Jewish,
oh, yeah, if only you're a Holocaust survivor. That's what counts. You just have to be a Holocaust survivor.
well, I think for Israel, if you're only 2% Jewish, even if it was your mother's mother who was a Jew,
David, you're contradicting yourself. Back in the day,
Ovi, was your grandmother a practicing Jew, or did she consider her Jewish identity important in any way?
the Israeli law that it doesn't matter if if his mother's mother was a Jew, that would not make him a Jew according to Israeli law.
Right. So there are various things like that come into play.
Look how this works. See, Jews love to say that, like, oh, didn't you know that Natalie Portman, her family was raised Jewish, and so she's Jewish. But then, as soon as an anti-Semite,
there's
has
disagreement.
Jewish blood,
It's
is
not
Bobby
about that,
Fischer
Ovi.
Jewish? Is Bobby Fischer Jewish?
It's not about that, Ovi. It's just a matter of how people would describe you without your political beliefs being a factor.
People have a right to call you a Jew. I mean, saying a Nazi who has 0% Jew in them, even though Jews don't consider you a Jew, does a Nazi have a right to exclude you because you're 2% Jewish blood? And you say, well, yeah, maybe they could define their terms however they want.
Right.
I can't call you a Jew if they want.
We're talking about practice here. So I consider myself Jewish because of all these different entities that consider me Jewish, and myself considering myself Jewish. So if you don't consider yourself Jewish,
here's the thing,
and none of these
Kyle,
entities consider you
that,
Jewish, then it doesn't make sense for you to call yourself a Jew, does it?
Well, here's the problem, Kyle, is that David has, at certain points in time, said that I'm his distant cousin. That I actually am Jewish. It doesn't matter. One drop is enough. I am David's.
Well, you are a distant cousin in those terms. You are a distant cousin in those terms.
Well, I mean, we haven't compared family trees. Like me and Babs have compared family trees, and you're saying, okay, it's reasonably likely that me and Babs are actually cousins, and we could actually find an exact genealogy. And say,
David, you've called me your distant cousin before. Don't even try to lie. Don't try to hide it.
everyone on the planet is my distant cousin. It's like,
Right.
if you have
And your cousins in that
you.
other special way, Ovi.
But I was saying,
But yeah,
guys call Babs my distant cousin.
right.
I think we actually could match ourselves on our personal family trees. When I call you my distant cousin, you haven't doxed yourself. You'd have to show me your family tree, and we could do the
Oh,
genealogy.
Yeah, but
I've shown you
this
my
is
face, Duvid, and I still haven't doxed myself. I have to give Duvid my fucking address in order for me to dox
No, I'm
myself.
Yep.
talking about genealogy. So what does it mean? Like, okay, everyone on this channel
you
is
could
probably
just
my,
you
my distant
Ovi,
cousin.
you could just give him your grandmother's name or your great grandmother's name. Which
Even
would be
CERN
all
is
you
my
need.
distant cousin. I mean, CERN
But-
might be my like 80th distant cousin. So, like,
I'm just all I'm
Further than
I'm
that.
saying is that these arguments that Duvid is making today are different than the arguments that he made in the past when he was trying to be friends with me. When Duvid was trying to drive a wedge between me and the Nazis, you know, other Nazi people, other Nazi supporters. These arguments that Duvid was making today, are totally different than the arguments that Duvid was making in the past.
No, they're
That's
not.
all
You're
I'm
just
saying.
saying- you're
That's
just
all I'm
saying
saying.
words for
Anyway,
no good reason.
I think Levi hasn't gotten to speak yet. Maybe Levi wants to speak. He's in the hangout. Hi, Levi.
Yeah, go ahead. He just
Hey,
playing
what's up?
for no good
Hey,
reason.
good to see you, man.
Wait, Fletcher, you're
I-
Levi?
Yeah.
Oh, you fucking faggot. You talking
Please,
shit in
language.
chat all the time?
Yeah, it's right, motherfucker. It looks like a fucking dick. Yeah, I agree with.
Oh,
I agree
Jesus
with
Christ.
What Kyle was saying,
Jesus
so.
Christ, Levi. Jesus Christ.
Let's see what.
Go ahead. Yeah. Blow some smoke up my ass, Levi. Go ahead.
One funny thing about these hangouts is just the absolute state of the control system. But anyway, yeah, Levi, do you have any thoughts on politics in general, or on the recent Luke streams, or on any of the members of the hangout besides Ov? I don't want to turn it into a fight between you and Ov. But
No. It's all good.
No, nothing much really. I was kind of sitting back and enjoying the show.
what do you think of the future of the Kyle stream, the Kyle world? Is it in these broad panel discussions, or is it in more narrowly focused, narrowly tailored conversations, as I have with CERN?
I think they both have their place. Like, these are actually pretty entertaining, but narrow, focused ones are also pretty good. So
Awesome.
a good balance, I guess, is ideal.
Yeah, I enjoy them in like completely different ways. It's kind of interesting. Like the narrowly tailored ones always leave me with a warm glow in my heart. But the ones that have a broader perspective, they're obviously just a lot more. It's more adrenaline, more excitement. You know, you feel more alive.
A little bit more high tea, I guess you could say.
I don't know about
Super
that,
high
bro.
tea, maybe.
Super high tea would be awesome. I want that. I want that trophy. I want Super High Tea to be on my channel first. I wanna deliver that to the Luke Nation.
It'd be like I would love to see him on a stream. He'd probably be really good.
Yeah,
it was like
hell
when we
yeah.
got large on stream and we actually heard his voice. That was interesting.
Yeah, I need to bring him on as well. He was actually a big contributor. You know, he has some interesting market thoughts. We could have some more bets, some more betting action on the coming recession, when the coming recession is going to come. Timing the drop, bros.
Yeah, definitely.
Make a lot of money if you can time the drop, man.
Actually, I
ride
had some
them.
thoughts on, like, you know, your battles with the Brundle clique and all these
Yeah.
people in the Bab stream.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think you're a really, really good debater. You know the facts well. You can argue well. So it was good that you kind of stuck to your guns and battled all those people like Matt
Yeah.
Bay, Brundle, even
And-
guys like No Apologies. You know, he would come on a little bit. And he's kind of he has a pretty
And-
good following.
Those three seem to, like, my issue. The reason why it got so laden with invective is that they spent like literally hours just trying to piss me off, trying to say the things that would make me the most angry, or that could be the most insulting and deep cutting. Like, that's what Matt
what?
Bay. Well, I was asked that recently by Brundle, and it's like it's hard to say exactly what. I mean, I could show you quotes, but it's not like they were using one-word insults. It's just that whenever I would do something, they would characterize that in the worst way possible, and that's what they would do in the chat. And then you can look on Twitter as well at what Brundlefly and Matt V are saying. It's not very flattering, and it includes things like trying to like get me in trouble with YouTube, which is just really scummy.
But yeah, I think you got to kind of wear that as a badge of honor. Like there's a reason why they're coming after you.
Hell yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, I mean, come on. It's. I mean, being a Jew isn't really a badge of honor. Like, we're
Hell
if you're a
is.
Jew, we're gonna come after you. So
that's not
yeah.
the sole reason why they're. That's not the sole reason why they're coming after him.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. Like look at the other Jews on the stream. They didn't get the same amount of pushback as me.
Well, I mean, to be fair though, Kyle, like it's you that goes on Luke Ford's stream. You do your own streams. I mean, you do kind of have your own, I don't know what you want to call it.
Perspective.
Yeah, well,
Ideology.
no, not perspective. No, I mean, no, you're kind of like in the limelight, so to speak, right?
Oh, for sure.
You do a lot of counter signaling, and that invites a lot of hate.
Oh, for sure.
And you argue it pretty well, I would say. I guess my like constructive criticism that might help you, maybe something worth thinking about is I think you're really good at debating ideas, and you don't have to. I know you get into the heat of the moment, and some of these people are it's just some offensive shit or whatever, but I don't think you need to revert to the insults. I think you're better off just arguing the ideas, whether it's Daniel, what he called you parasitic or something, which is something that's not gonna make you very happy.
Yeah, I mean, the insults are like a way of keeping things on an even keel, right? Like if I get a lot of insults thrown my way, like I don't think that Ovi has even thrown a single like personal insult at me, or well, I might be
True.
My threshold might be high, but that's my impression, and so like I don't think that it's appropriate for me to throw invective back. It's just that when that starts throwing out, if I'm receiving it and not putting it out, it makes one think like, do I think myself to be in an inferior position, or to not have the same moral gravity as the people who are throwing the insults? These are the things that come to mind, I think. And I mean, it's an interesting question. I've thought about like being more analytical, but I think that the mix of analysis and invective actually works pretty well in terms of trying to limit the invective thrown at me.
I did hear one thing. And this is not something that I've witnessed myself, just something that I've heard through the grapevine, is that apparently I've heard, Kyle, that you will purposely lower people's volume.
I did that once. I actually literally only figured out that trick once during my last conversation with Bundlefly. He was talking while I was talking, and I was like, I'm going to mute my computer. It doesn't generally work because in general, you have like multiple people talking, but in this case, it was just Brundle and me, so I just muted my computer when he was talking because we were trying to talk at the same time. But no, I don't do that. Okay. I don't like. It's not a tactic. It wouldn't work on Luke Ford. I would instantly get kicked out if I was doing that all the time because like Luke Ford hates interruptions and wants you to especially if like he's talking or Kevin Michael Grace is talking, you have to be able to get out of the way.
Interesting.
But it made Brundle super mad. It made Brundle super mad, and I was looking to make Brundle mad, man.
I bet it did. I bet
really,
it did.
really fucking.
Yeah.
That guy is really, he's talked vocally about how mad I make him, but he also makes me extremely full of rage. After all this time.
Yeah, you don't make me mad, Kyle. Like Duvit doesn't make me mad. Mike doesn't make me mad. Like God forbid, even Jennifer doesn't make me mad.
A lot of it was personal, like the fact that I was coming on Luke's stream, which he saw as kind of his territory. He's like said this expressly, and that my views kind of interfere maybe with his relationship with Luke. So that was like I think largely what made it personal, and then it goes from there.
Well, because Luke Ford is stake horsing and basically rigging debates in your favor. So it obviously makes.
Oh God, here.
It's all rigged. All the races are rigged, bro.
Well, can do whatever he wants with his stream. But to most people, it's pretty clear that whatever reason Luke Ford is promoting you, and even I'll call it rigging debates in your favor, stake horsing you, and that probably causes people to be upset at you. And it's it's natural. It's just like, why the hell is this guy being promoted and hooked up over me? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Ford made
Believe it or not, it's 100% Luke's appreciation for my arguments.
Yeah, I don't think anyone buys that, but I mean, it's remotely possible, but I think that's probably the reason for the hatred. And it's just like, what the fuck? They made this punk.
When did Luke rig a debate? What the hell kind of framing is that?
Dude, Luke rigs the debates
what do you mean,
all the time.
What do you mean? We'll define rig. I mean, what do you mean rig?
Well, he'll for example, like this is from my own personal experience. He'll let me on stream, and then he'll let me talk for about 10 minutes, and he says, "Oh, well, that was great. You had your 15 minutes of fame, and now you got to go." It's just like, wait a second.
It's not your show. I mean, he's entitled to let you on for however long he wants.
Yeah, but I mean, if I'm only allowed to come on for 15 minutes.
Debates.
Wait.
Okay,
this was not
debates. I mean, you're
Kyle for like 10 minutes, and then he's like, "Nice having you on, OV." And then like he bounces you off.
But that was like Ovi was brought on to tell his story, and this was in the Luke Ford era where Ovi,
but I've been on,
where he was very
Luke
leery of having
I've
Ovi
been on
on
Luke Stream before that.
But
that's
exactly
not the only time that I've been on
those
Luke
times
Stream.
and those times you got a lot more leeway. But Luke Ford has been more leery of that
every
sort of thing.
time that I've been on Luke Stream, it's always been like, oh yeah, you can say like your 5 minutes apiece, and then no, you got to go. We don't really want to have a real conversation with a Nazi.
Kyle like moralize about you for like 20 minutes after you're gone.
I mean if rigging
that's
in the context of
certainly Luke is stake horsing and promoting Kyle.
I mean at this point,
that's like a
Kyle,
weird call to make.
I think Kyle, you're much more authentic than Luke is, to be honest. Like I mean, I've been on your stream for like the past couple hours now, and we've had a back and forth. There's been other people coming on. Like it's been
the only time I'll censor is for invective, or I'm not going to censor someone for arguments, and but I will censor for invective and for imagery that violates or violates terms of service and my sensibilities. But I'm not going to censor for arguments and a calm rational discussion. I don't think that that's appropriate.
And I think that's.
You're not going to admit the point that. I mean, and I'm not saying that there's any punitive punishment, but to say Luke Ford is promoting you, if you want to take it hyperbolic, what it calls rigging debates in your favor, and that causes other people to have a larger negative reaction towards you because
does he not? Well, hold on. I mean, does he not have other people on or something? I mean, like, is he deliberately preventing other people from joining?
Luke Ford is not required to be fair, but if you're looking, I want a fair intellectual debate of these ideas. You don't get that from Luke Ford. Luke Ford is stake horsing and promoting Kyle. And
I don't believe that at all. I think that what you're seeing is the fact that people have limited bandwidth.
We're not talking shit about you, Kyle. Like what David is saying.
Negative. Like we had season tickets at the stadium, and like when I was a kid, I sat front row at boxing matches, and it's a common strategy. Saying like get the guy like an 8-0 record by like rigging or having him fight.
Yeah, but I don't think that Luke Ford rigged things in my favor at all. In fact, Luke Ford, in many ways, made it more difficult for me to discuss things because there was this rule about interrupting, and there's this sequence of interleaving guests, which I like had to push in order to actually make my points. So no, I don't think that the debates were rigged at all. I think that actually, in many ways, my efficacy was dampened by just the practices of the Luke Ford stream, which he's welcome to. He is.
But that's not the point. That Luke Ford is still stake horsing and promoting you. And
he's promoting me for sure. That he did for sure. He was for sure promoting me and praising me. So that's what he was doing.
Things that more in my favor that would make it even better for me. But
I don't think
I think it's pretty undeniable that he's stake horsing you.
I don't think that he was promoting me for sure. He was praising me for sure. Was he making it easier for me to have these discussions? Absolutely not. In fact, he would sometimes intervene against me. I think that he was at a certain point saying it would be unfair.
That's a natural cause of hatred. The fact that Luke Ford, if you just want to use the word promoting, and you don't want to say rigging debates or stake horsing, that's too much for you to go that far. But just promoting you, that's enough to cause like these guys like No Apology, Brundle, Matvey, and like what the fuck, Luke Ford's not promoting me.
For sure, yeah. But wait. Brundle and Matvey were allowed on the stream, right? And until Brundle started to get like spicy enough that he was risking the stream. And Matvey was always allowed on the stream, I believe. I don't believe that there was ever a time until he finally like started insulting Luke directly. I don't believe that there was ever a time where Matvey couldn't come on.
Let me put it. Wait. Hold on.
Let OV talk.
David, if I can. David, hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second, David. Hold on.
Let's let OV talk here.
Promotion and music promotion, and this is just a common thing. Luke is in Hollywood, and it's like if you have 5-10 bands or actors that you have, and you give your best hookups to one guy, that causes the other people to have resentment towards that one person. And it's pretty clear that like whatever reason Luke Ford chose you, and that's causing resentment of the other people that didn't get what they feel was the hookups that you're getting.
Yeah, but Matvey could come on at any time. Brundle could come on at any time. They were not prevented from coming on like until very late in the game. Go ahead, Ovi.
Yeah, I think, David, you're actually kind of not making the right argument, right? Where let's put this another way. And this is not like a slight against you, Kyle, when I say this, but I mean, can you think of a better Jew for Luke to have on his stream than you?
Well, in terms of advancing my specific perspective, or even more broadly, Luke's perspective on the dissident right and stuff like that, well, no, I can't.
Right. I mean, and so that's exactly the point, right? Is that you say everything that Luke wants to be said, everything that Luke believes, everything that, that makes Luke, because obviously Luke is Goyim, right? Luke is
we
not
disagree on
a real
a
Jew.
lot of points. We disagree on a lot of points, but I think that what you're seeing is conclusions. Well, you're kind of okay. A lot of what drew me to Luke was the fact that he was saying things that resonated with me, right? So it's not like there's a scheme here to big up someone. I just came on his stream, and he wanted me on again. This applies to tons of people.
I'm not saying that you're scheming. I'm saying that Luke is scheming, is what I'm saying.
Well, he invites so many people on, and I'm the one who keeps accepting the invite, right? It's not that, that he doesn't invite
to everybody.
Yeah, he gives invites to a lot of people, but you're the only one that really you and KMG are the only ones that really
we keep
have
accepting
the long lasting invite.
And the reason is you want to know
that Luke gives you preferential treatment.
Yeah, but one thing that people have to understand is that you have to be able to deal with.
You're saying it's not accurate that Luke gives you preferential treatment.
Yeah, it's not accurate. What's special about me is not that Luke prefers me so much. What is that I accept the invite. I'll wait my turn to talk. This involves a lot of waiting and more waiting over time, right? So most people, they accept the invite. They wait around for a while. They talk maybe a few times, and then they don't come back or they don't come back very often, right? Because it's kind of a hard thing to be ready to talk at all times, but not talking for sometimes 45 minutes. People don't like that, and so I'm the one who keeps accepting the invite and keeps coming back.
Yeah, honestly, that format is making the show less appealing to me. The fact that he just has a single person talking, and it's not even him. Like, it's his show, but it's not him talking. For 45 minutes straight.
Right, and it's not like I can interject at any time that I want, and it's like I have a free hand to interject, and no one has a free hand to interject. That's why there aren't that many people who keep coming back. I'm the person who keeps coming back and both and participating long term in the streams. Right, that's me and KMG really. Like it's not like there's people can come on when they want. They're not prevented from coming on, and they can say their piece. But then they'll have to take their turn. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to jump in because I knew David was getting ready to go off on another monologue there. But don't you think in a lot of ways Brundle kind of did this? Because
oh, here we go. Here it comes.
Kyle said himself that he saw the way Brundle ran me off the show, and he made the decision that that wasn't going to happen to him. So obviously it had some bearing on his behavior. Okay, Obi,
Yeah.
this is not a conspiracy theory. This is a quote from a person who's sitting right here who can correct me anytime. So I really think in a lot of ways, Brundle, Kyle dug his heels in. Brundle is also the type to dig his heels in. And I think that is largely what led Luke to do the things that were later perceived as favoritism, frankly.
Right, and it should be remembered that like there was a long period where Brundle got chance after chance after chance. When a major donator was feuding with Brundle in the chat, Luke banned the major donator, not Brundle. I was constantly being reined in, right? While Brundle was doing the most ridiculous of things in my mind, I was actually being reined in. I don't want to exaggerate that, but that was happening. It's not the case that Luke was always being like, get him, Kyle, get him, Kyle. That was not the attitude that I got from Luke.
So, yeah, and obviously this is a little bit of a complicated conversation because Luke is a Orthodox convert, but he still is Goyim. But when you say that you and Luke disagree on things, what would you say that you and him disagree on?
I think that he is more socially conservative than me. I am more optimistic about tech and the future. I am more obviously where I'm secular. He's religious. That's a big disagreement, and that comes with all sorts of disagreements about like the best way to live a life. Then there's things like in terms of the IQ question, like he regards it as being of more importance than me. He also he's heterodox in the direction that I'm in, but to a larger extent. For instance, he believes that life expectancy did not increase due to advances in medicine over the past several decades. I believe like a much weaker version of that. I believe that you don't see an increase in life expectancy as a result of increased health spending, or at least a very small increase in life expectancy, particularly when you're talking about A/B testing, where you give some people insurance and don't give the other people insurance, and they're from the same randomized group. You don't see a significant difference in life expectancy, but that does not translate to medicine is not efficacious. I think that he's more of an IQ fundamentalist than me, and he's more of a skeptic about certain things like medicine and education than in some ways that I would be. Like he's a skeptic in the same direction as me, just to a greater extent.
I mean.
Oh, and I'll add that I think that conversation should be fluid, not disrespectful, but fluid. And I don't believe that interrupting, like I just did, is necessarily rude. But he is extremely anti-interruption, and he will castigate you like extremely hard for interrupting, even in a way that I don't consider impolite. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a fair answer. I think I see where you're coming from with that answer, and I don't disagree with it. And I think what you say, actually, I would agree with you when you say that, yeah, if you give people health care, I mean, their lifespan will be on average longer. I mean, that to me is just basic common sense.
Right,
so
and to be clear, I'm talking about, well, what I'm saying does not increase lifespan empirically is say giving people the quote unquote extras. So there is a crucial base level of care that you get in the first world, which is extremely expensive, but you don't necessarily pay for it. These are separate things. But yeah, like that is really, really important, super duper important. But the extras that you get in terms of having an easier time getting to the doctor when you have insurance, that doesn't seem to have much of an effect. Maybe because that extra going to the doctor over and above the absolute necessary doesn't really have much of an effect. And even could have like sometimes a negative effect. Like that's happened to my mother where she's gone for things and it's this kind of like that I don't know if you've seen that South African condom which has spikes pointing inward, and it's like you can get in and then sometimes you get the wrong person and it's hard to get out. Right? Sometimes someone is really cautious and is like, actually, we need to look into this more. And then that's bounced to someone who is also cautious and is also like, yeah, we need to look into this more. And before you know it, you're in like a situation for a very innocuous thing, which is actually kind of both extremely stressful and maybe harmful for your health. I've seen that in person. So yeah, that can happen.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't really see that I'm in disagreement with that.
Aaron says Olaf refuses to talk to Jews now. That's Melchizedek. What can you do, Kyle? Luke has radicalized Melchizedek very thoroughly. It's over for him. It's over for Melchizedek cells. That's it.
Are we gonna get Aaron on stream, or maybe even Kanop on stream?
Like historically, when I was first on Luke's stream, like he was hitting me with these like Hitler jokes, and everyone was laughing. And then I said something. It was like beyond the pale. Like I said, like critique of Luke's show, and Luke would say, Luke was very hardcore. Like he was almost pro Hitler from for a few months, and then he had a pretty hard.
No, he wasn't.
Was he really pro Hitler?
Luke was.
Don't exaggerate.
Duvid, like the way that you criticize people like cuts really deep, or at least it feels like you're trying to cut deep in terms of how deep you want your criticism to go and how fundamental you want it to be, and so that's what people like object to. I think it's not that you're obscene; it's that you don't perceive these boundaries in terms of people's self-regard. Right now, in my case, I don't really mind it. I find it interesting and new. But Luke will mind it, right? Luke is obviously the kind of personality who will mind that a lot.
Luke gets me on the show with the telling me that he wants to talk about Torah, and then for like 2 weeks straight, all he wants to talk about is Hitler. And then he brings Churchill on, and he's basically saying like the arguments. Well, doesn't it make sense that like Hitler wanted to kill you guys, and that the Holocaust happened, and you guys deserved it, and
I think you don't understand Luke.
I can answer that question, dude.
I mean, I say it's beyond the pale. I was like, like Luke, I don't think your show has potential to making money. Like Luke,
well,
whatever. And then like Luke having these guys telling me that like God forbid my family deserved to die in the Holocaust, so they shouldn't have been there anyways. But like,
but Duvid, you're missing the.
Let's let Ovi speak, and then Levi. Ovi.
Yeah, so Duvid, you're actually missing the point. I mean, I can name you conservative rabbis who say that, like, oh yeah, I mean, Hitler was totally right to purge the Jews because these were these liberal Jews, which Duvid would count himself amongst. These are the liberal Jews that were promoting homosexuality, promoting all of the the liberal shit that corrupts societies, and yeah, Hitler was right. And these are conservative rabbis, Orthodox rabbis that are saying this.
Rabbis.
Let's let Levi speak now. Levi wanted to say something.
No, I basically made my point. Just
okay, cool. Duvid.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed that at length, but I'm saying Luke definitely took a turn where he was basically promoting the alt-right, promoting these ideas.
Not really. Well, maybe from a certain point of view, but the problem is, Duvid, is that I think it was more like an opportunist kind of thing that Luke was doing, where Luke saw an opportunity where he's getting viewers from the alt-right, he's getting viewers from the neo-Nazis, so-called, whatever, and he saw that as a way to, if it was a choice between the,
I agree with you. I mean, the period when I was on the show, I would, 25% of his audience were probably pro-Hitler, and Luke played to those people. It's like,
right. But if I could just jump in, I think that you have to understand, Luke is exploring these dark subjects because he believes that this is the way to understand how you can avoid that in the future. This is the way to understand like the forces behind history and human nature and all that sort of thing. He's not saying he's trying to.
I appreciate Luke, but I'm saying like I still have the messages. Like I know what happened, and like we were supposed to have a Talmud show. We were going to do Perky Avos, and then like every single time it's like, let's talk about Hitler.
Yeah. So Luke will have his passions, right? Luke will go into his passions, and I don't think that that's a sign that he's sympathetic. Well, it's not a sign that he's sympathetic. It's a sign that he's interested in these subjects. Like much as with pornography, it's not that he loved pornographers and he said as much himself. It's just that he finds fascination with these dark subjects.
Yeah,
that's actually an interesting argument.
Trying to do it, but then Luke was kind of like a pussy. So like I'm hitting back on him It's like, Luke, you're
Dude,
fucked up.
no, you're just incredibly abrasive. Like you say insulting.
I'm incredibly abrasive because Luke
Throw to
brings
everybody, not just
show
Luke.
claiming he wants to talk about Torah and do a show on Perky Elbow.
Aggressive
And then it
remarks.
turns out he wants to talk about Hitler every night. And then I push back a little bit. He's like, dude, that's beyond the pale. I have never been treated like that in my life. And it's like, what the fuck? The guy who wants me to talk about Hitler every night is now accusing me of having bad manners.
Well, yeah, you can still have bad manners. That doesn't stop you from having bad manners.
Yeah.
And then okay, whatever. If you whatever interpretation Luke stands in judgment before Shem on his own, he took a turn, and he went KMG and then he went Kyle. But there was definitely a period of a month or two where it was alt-right. It was the alt-right tonight, and the most common topic of conversation was Hitler.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. He's always had an interest in, or at least as long as I've known him, he's had an interest in World War II and in the Third Reich and all that stuff. I mean, I'm interested in it. It's not about worshiping it. It's about one of the formative forces behind the modern world.
The show, he said he likes Eric Stryker and Mike Enoch, but like Duvid, just as a person, I don't like him. I don't know what episode that is, but he's like, yeah, I like Mike Enoch and Eric Stryker. Whatever, he might have minor disagreements, but like Duvid as a person, I just don't like this guy.
Well, here's the thing, David. Who is more in line with what Luke Ford wants? Is it the white nationalists who want to deport all the Jews, or is it Duvid who wants to have this global homo system? Who is more in line with what Luke Ford wants?
I'm not sure. I mean, because it's unclear what Luke Ford wants. You could interpret.
I don't think it's that really unclear, to be honest.
Well, at this point, because it's okay, it's ironic. So, I'm not friends with Luke Ford, and Eric Stryker and Mike Enoch are not friends with Luke Ford.
You're only friends with me, Duvid. How does that feel?
Luke Ford was basically.
Hey, he's friends with Jen, isn't he?
Eric Stryker. I do not want to be friends with Duvid.
Yeah.
And now I don't think now he's kind of pushed back where he's like, oh, these Mike Enoch and Eric Stryker, they're not such good guys after all.
Right.
Yeah, I like Duvid.
Go ahead.
I like its harshness. Most people maybe don't, but it's something I respect in an intellectual. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting to watch, but it's annoying.
I like Duvid too. Yeah.
I like it. I like that.
Duvid, the friend of Nazis.
People who host with Duvid seem to often want to tear their hair out, but I mean,
confrontational status with the blue-eyed man was more successful than the Jewish alt-right kiss ass please be friends with me, blue-eyed man. Please be friends with me. You blue-eyed men are more messed up than Negroes.
I have to say, this was one of the most confusing things to me about the stream was this blue-eyed man meme that kept coming up.
The Negro to the blue-eyed man, in essence, worked out better.
I found it so bizarre. Like, why are people talking about blue eyes? What the hell is going on with this chat?
Blue eyes are the superior race, Kyle. Come on.
Blonde hair, blue eyes. But this was just the obsession with blue eyes, and I was like, what? And it was like in a pejorative sense. It's like, you must be one of those blue-eyed people. What's going on? All right, folks, I do have to wrap up the show within the next 10 minutes or so, but I want to give people the opportunity to give final words. So let's start with OV. Do you have anything else you'd want to say to me or to the stream?
We have a great and loving uncle. And I think that we should all understand and respect what our great and loving Uncle A told us, and praise him. Peace be upon him, and hail our Uncle A.
Charming. Jen, anything you want to add?
Thanks for having me on, Kyle. Just wanted
Glad to have you.
Quick question for OV. What percentage German are you by blood, bro?
1/8.
Oh.
Oh God, he has less German in him than me.
Yeah, Yeah, apparently, yeah. But it's all right because I'm mostly Italian. I'm mostly Roman, which is where the Germans got all their ideas. So it doesn't even matter. I'm the OG German, you could say.
Ooh, the crucial question, Ovi, is it South Italian or North Italian?
Well, I can tell you that I'm blonde hair and blue eyed, but I'm Central Italian, to be honest. Well, my father's
Fence sitters.
family is Slovenian, which is basically Northern Italian, and my mother's family is Central Italian.
All right, Mike, anything you want to say? Final words?
Yeah, I guess your show is good, and yeah, I didn't really get to finish earlier because so many people trying to talk, but
Yeah, I wanted to hear Mike speak some more, to be honest. I mean, he is my co-host and everything, So
yeah, we haven't done a show in a while, but no, I think like your debates are good, debating of ideas. People like to see that. You get a lot of hate watchers too, which I think you should embellish that.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I guess there's certain ideas that are definitely real that you might disagree with, like maybe Ecke's term of replacement or white genocide, or you might disagree with those terms and maybe you think they're ridiculous. But I think it's real to a lot of people, so it's definitely worthwhile to discuss those ideas that you might disagree with, but your opponents that really get triggered at you, it's important to them, So hopefully you're able to have more of those. Like on Babs Cast seems to be like the battle zone. So
right, the nuclear wasteland. I hope Babs can come on and give his final word. Duvid, anything you want to say?
I was just going to finish up real quick. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good that you don't always want to talk about the JQ. You want to talk about good ideas on your own show, but it's always good to go battle over there. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Duvid?
Yeah, good luck to you streaming, Kyle. Good luck to Luke Ford. I wish Luke Ford the best. I had wanted him to, his original intention of kind of having a Jew cast and talking Torah and, like a pro kind of like sages, and even Babs, those didn't manifest. I haven't been able to find those circles of like people that are just interested in like learning and talking about Judaism. But I still enjoy these conversations every once in a while. And even like, so it's ironic, like OV and sometimes people like him are more receptive to just like listening and hearing about Jewish history and Jewish ideas than actual Jews. So
it's a heartwarming service that OV provides.
Well, yeah, I mean, my desire in streaming remains unfulfilled, but it doesn't mean that like Luke Ford's free to take his show in any direction that he wants, and I wish him success. And same with you, and thanks for hosting these conversations. Blessing. Have a happy Yom Kippur. If you don't, whether you fast or not, you should be sealed into the book of life for another year of peace and prosperity, and happy, healthy year.
God bless. I just real quick, Duvid. I think if your payos were a little bit more tailored, a little bit more kempt, maybe Luke would let you on stream a little bit more. Is all I'm saying.
And final words, CERN, if you're still here, if he hasn't gone AFK. CERN, do you have any final words to say?
Yeah, I just want to put it on the record that I have basically 0% Jew in me.
There we go. The record is clarified. All right, and with that, I have to say goodnight. Regrettably.
Wait. What about Levy?
No,
did I forget Levy?
Yeah, good stream, good show.
Oh, great.
Keep up the work.
Excellent, and thank you for coming on, everyone. Good night.
Oh wait! Before we leave, where's the after party at?
I think this is the after party, I'm afraid. And with this, we fall into darkness.
Goodbye, everyone. No after party on a Monday.